Chapter 151, Re-entering the Mist Village. In the hotel, Ryo looked curiously at the two pieces of metal that were the size of a child's fist each. Kubikariba's blade had an intriguing property. It was able to self-repair whenever it got damaged by being exposed to blood. If this metal is used to make other weapons, they should have a similar property. Ryo felt no need for a weapon. With Ice Release and all it could provide, what weapon would he ever need? And Jiraiya also doesn't usually use swords or such weapons, but he paid for this metal anyway. Jiraiya-san, I didn't expect you to be so rich. You have so many rare gems. Ryo said with a smile. Those are no rare gems, they're just ordinary crystals that I've infused with natural energy. What? Jiraiya-san, you're a master trickster. Ryo was completely shocked by Jiraiya's genius moved. They had been here for such a short time, and not only did Jiraiya complete his task, but he also acquired such precious metals practically for free. Ryo was admiring this lecherous man more and more. Kid, this is no time to be surprised. We have done our task, and now just need to leave. Ryo nodded. As soon as the two left the room, they headed straight to the port. When the ship left the port, Jiraiya was finally relieved. As they left the water country, their mission was finally a complete success. After the boat traveled for an hour or so, after leaving the borders, Ryo said to Jiraiya, Jiraiya-san, I have something I need to tell you. What is it? Since the mission ended with success, Jiraiya asked Ryo about what he wanted to say casually. I want to return to the water country. Alright, go, wait, what did you say? Back to the water country. Jiraiya remained silent, staring at Ryo. Yes, Jiraiya-san. The sanbai means a lot to me. You can just go back to Konoha alone. I want to go to the water country and find a way to get the sanbai. Ryo said firmly. Kid, are you serious? This is the water country, that's the mist enemy village you're talking about. We've then fully got out safely. I won't agree with this. Jiraiya also firmly rejected Ryo's request. Jiraiya-san, you can rest assured. I've put a teleportation barrier in the hotel, no one could stop me. I've also left much of my ice in the mist village, it won't be a problem for me to sneak in. As Jiraiya thought about Ryo's words, the latter noticed that he was loosening up to the idea. Don't worry Jiraiya-san, if I find I'm in trouble, I'll just withdraw immediately. You know Minato Ni-san's teleportation barrier. It's fail-proof, and I should have no problems escaping. After some persuasion, Ryo succeeded in convincing Jiraiya to let him return to the water country. So Ryo used the teleportation barrier mark he had left in the hotel room to return there, and then used transformation jutsu to look like Chingyuki, to keep himself from being discovered immediately. After making his preparations, Ryo teleported into the building where Jiraiya made the purchase. He placed his ice scalpel on the second floor before leaving. Therefore, that's who he reappeared. He did not expect to find Chingyuki in the room. When he did, he immediately activated his Sharingan, using Genjutsu immediately on him. Ching lost control of his body before being able to react. Ryo did not hesitate, rushing towards Ching and slitting his throat, then using his clan signature techniques to invade his mind. Ryo's use of this technique had its important purpose for Ryo. He was able to use it to obtain a lot of information from Ching. Initially, he just wanted to recognize the trait of his character to look natural, and not raise suspicions. But after going through over a half of his memory, he ended up deciding to return to Ching's home, as he saw in that an opportunity to get closer to the Sanbai Jinchuriki. He then proceeded to seal Ching's corpse in a scroll, stood up and walked downstairs. The guard who were seeing Chingyuki get down did not ask any questions. Following what he learned from Ching's memories, Ryo went to the Yuki clan's residence. Ching was the clan's second in command. He and Bing Yuki were both quasi-Kage tier. However, the family had a chief elder who was Kage tier. In the Mist Village, Ching was the clan's representative, while the clan's head was Bing. But in reality, the one really ruling the clan was the chief elder. Ryo did not want to meet the chief elder. But Ching was sent by him to trade the metal for jewels. If he wanted to pass as Ching, Ryo had to live his life. To avoid any possible problems, Ryo re-injected natural energy within the crystal just to ensure that they weren't going to transform back anytime soon. Knock knock. Chief, I'm Ching. I've brought what you wanted. Well, come on in. Hearing the voice coming from inside the house, Ryo immediately pushed the door in. He knew that the elders hated waiting from Qing's memories. The chief elder looked a lot older than Qing, and his hair was snow white. His bodies were actually emitting coldness. His Kekkei Genkai was developed beyond their own control, to the point where their bodies were seeping out with ice-released chakra. On his side, Bing Yuki was sitting. Ryo put the box full of crystals in front of them, and the chief elder opened it and showed a smile of satisfaction. Qing, you've done very well on this sale. We'll be giving these crystals to the Mizukage, and that should help a lot with alleviating the clan's financial problems. You're praising me too much. This is what I do. Ryo talked in Qing's tone. Well, Bing, what's the kid doing about the passage of the Sanbai? The chief elder asked. Well, I don't know. We've barely seen Yagura-san ever since the passing of the third. I don't have specific information progress. Bing said after giving the matter some thought. That kid Yagura doesn't know what he's thinking. This Jinchuriki is no longer good. Now is the time to make the transfer. I don't know how he's thinking. The chief elder was somewhat dissatisfied. Chief, don't worry about it. Yagura-san is only in his early 20s, he's bound to make some mistakes. The elder could only give the young ones pointers. Answered Big immediately. Well, you two come with me to the Sanbai Jinchuriki tonight. I need to see Yagura is doing. Yes, chief. Bing and Ryo both agreed simultaneously. Leaving the room of the chief, Bing and Ryo bid farewell to each other before the latter went to where the clan was hiding its scrolls. On the Wave Country's battlefield, Ryo learned most of the clan's jutsus. However, there must have been some that Bing didn't use against him, and that's what Ryo was seeking. The Yuki clan was a large one, and had a very high status in the Mist Village. The building where they placed their scrolls was really luxurious. Ryo went directly to the second floor, where he knew, based on Qing's memories, the secret jutsus of the Yuki clan were hidden. Chapter 152, Sanbai. In the evening, Ryo and Bing went to the place where the Sanbai was captured along with the chief head of the Yuki clan. The Sanbai was hidden in the basement of the Mizukage's building, and Yagura remained there as well. It wasn't clear to Ryo when Yagura was controlled, but he was sure that the Mizukage was going to end up being controlled by Madara. In the manga, it was the sealing of the Sanbai in Rin's body that made her commit suicide at the hands of Kakashi, and that was the catalyst of almost all of the unfortunate events that followed. If Madara did not control Yagura at that time, how would the Mist agree to seal an important strategic weapon such as the Sanbai within Rin? Seeing Yagura, Ryo felt quite nervous, as the one in front of him might have been actually Uchiha Madara, the man who forged the fate of many generations. After some hesitation, Ryo still ventured to open the Sharingan and observe Yagura's chakra flow. He had to do so. If he was to confirm that Yagura was being controlled by Madara, he would have to immediately leave. However, he didn't observe any abnormalities in Yagura's chakra flow. Therefore, he confirmed that the Mizukage wasn't being controlled. With that, Ryo confirmed that he wasn't trying to take the Sanbai on Madara's watch. That alone comforted him a lot. Yagura, what are you thinking about? It's been so long. Why haven't you started to transfer the Sanbai? The Yuki chief elder asked. That's my business. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Yagura frowned and said faintly. I'm going to see for myself what you're thinking. After that, the chief took Bing and Ryo along with him, entering the basement. There, Ryo was able to finally see the Sanbai that he had been dreaming of meeting. Yes, it wasn't the Sanbai Jinchuriki that Ryo saw, it was the Sanbai itself, extracted from its human vessel. At this time, the Sanbai's body looked smaller the few biju that Ryo had already encountered. On top of that, its eyes were abnormal, as if it was under control. Ryo was surprised. How come the Sanbai could be this small? Moreover, he could not remember any means possessed by the mist that would allow them to be capable of controlling the Sanbai. So how come it's under control? What's the matter, Yagura? What happened to the Jinchuriki? The chief was startled at the sight of the Sanbai. As you can see, we have extracted the Sanbai from its Jinchuriki and put it under control. Why not seal it within you immediately? The Sanbai has lost a part of its chakra after the extraction. I intend on waiting for it to recover first. After listening to Yagura's explanation, the elder didn't speak. Ryo also understood why the Sanbai was so small. The whole basement fell silent for a while, and during that time, Ryo was trying to figure out a way to take the Sanbai away. In that small basement, there was the fourth Mizukage, and the chief elder of the Yuki clan, making for 2 cage tier ninjas. There was Bing Yuki, and 2 other Umbu Kwasai cages in the building. It was impossible to take the Sanbai away under their noses. However, this was an opportunity that Ryo really didn't want to give up on. The Sanbai was just too important to him. Having the Sanbai would be the equivalent to having Tobirama's legendary contract with the sea. Ryo would get access to inexhaustible water. With a lot of water support, Ryo's attack power would become independent from the location he's fighting in. The Sanbai itself had great chakra. With such great chakra, Ryo could evolve to become cage tier, without the use of the Ice Lightning Chakra mode and Sage mode. Thinking of that, Ryo's eyes became determined. Greatness comes from facing danger. This opportunity is not to be missed. Deciding of taking action, Ryo was slowly approaching the Biju. The people in the basement are all strong, and they all noticed Ryo approaching the Sanbai. The chief elder raised his eyebrow, was about to reprimand, but Yagura had already started to attack Shingyuki. The elder snorted and formed an ice wall, blocking Yagura's attack. "Old man, what do your people want to do? Do you think he could just touch whatever he sees?" said Yagura with some sarcasm. "If my hair does wrong, this old man will punish him." "Did you have to immediately attack?" asked the elder. "I am the Mizukage, I can dispose of ninjas in the village." "That's where you're wrong. It's regular ninjas that you can handle." Bing Yuki stood besides the elder, showing his support to him against Yagura. The mist choose their cage based on his strength. Yagura taking the position at such a young age made many dissatisfied. Among those people were the Yuki clan, and Ryo was just so lucky. Yagura had angered the already dissatisfied chief elder. After all, to him, this wasn't Ryo Yamanaka that Yagura was attacking. It was Shingyuki, the second in command and the spokesman of the clan. The three looked at each other in anger, and the mood was tense. Meanwhile, Ryo was again slowly approaching the Sanbai. As soon as he reached it, he quickly pulled out 2 scrolls with the 4 symbols seal and opened them, quickly making his hand seals. The three realized that they had done wrong. Even though they had never seen the 4 symbols seal before, they could know it was Fuinjutsu related. Quickly they all tried to interrupt Ryo, but he was a step ahead, sealing some of the Sanbai's chakra and soul. Ryo's main target was the beast's soul. Having that is equivalent to having the Biju itself. In the manga, the Kyubi was divided in 2 by Minato, and the beast's soul was split. Ryo, knowing that, made his main target the beast's soul. Moreover, the Sanbai's chakra was too large, and Ryo didn't have much time. He could only seal the beast's soul. Yagura didn't notice that actually most of the beast's soul had been sealed by Ryo, who left just a small part of the soul and most of the chakra behind. He could only notice that the Sanbai's size further diminished by a quarter. He was already waiting for the beast to slowly recover its chakra, and then this happened. The chief elder immediately formed an ice prison around Ryo, and the raging Yagura attacked him with several water release attacks. Ryo was in no hurry. As the attacks were about to hit him, he used the teleportation barrier and was back in his hotel room. Seeing Ryo disappear, Yagura's face changed heavily, and the chief elder also realized that this person was not Shingyuki. The two immediately rushed out, and they both mobilized the ninjas in the village to trace Ryo. Ryo looked at his spoils in the hotel. One of the 2 scrolls held 4/5 of the Sanbai's soul, while the other held a quarter of its chakra. With that, Ryo was very satisfied. He hid the scrolls, and just when he was about to leave, a horrible chakram made his body freeze, and he slowly turned his head, to find an all-white man standing quietly behind him. Chapter 153, Facing the Mist Village. "So now, after taking what you wanted, you want to leave just like that?" A voice of a weather-stricken old man came from the Zutsu behind them. Hearing that voice, and feeling the horrifying chakra coming from the white Zutsu behind him, Ryo had no doubt that it was just a messenger for Madara. Ryo looked gloomily at the white Zetsu in front of him. He could not understand how he felt such pressure from it. White Zetsus should be just at the level of Chunin. However, this one made Ryo feel that he was at the presence of Madara himself. "Who are you?" Ryo asked, pretending not to know. "My identity shouldn't matter. What matters is that you have taken something that doesn't belong to you." For a second, Ryo, though he had seen a scarlet flash out of Zetsu's eyes. For the first time, Ryo was so grateful for having the Sharingan. He didn't believe that he would able to see said flash without them. When seeing those red eyes, Ryo realized that the pressure he felt should be the result of a genjutsu, one that's used on him by Madara. He formed his hand seals, and the genjutsu was immediately lifted. While Madara's eyes did evolve into the Rinnegan, he now only had an ordinary 3-tomo Sharingan. Ryo was able to successfully undo the Uchiha's genjutsu. After doing that, Ryo kept his distance from Jutsu. Observing him, he found that the being's power was indeed not superior to that of a Chunin, but with his chakra close to that of a Jonin. Haha! Ryo! Yamanaka! I didn't think you'd actually be an Uchiha. Glad to see that the clan is still having such fine youth. Madara sighed. Facing Madara, lying would be futile. The moment Ryo used the Sharingan was the moment he doomed himself to be distinguished. So he didn't have to hide anything, and removed the contact lenses given to him by Fugaku. It was terrifying genjutsu. If it wasn't for my Sharingan, I would still be under it, said Ryo. You're fascinating young man. If you survive facing the water country, I must see you later. After saying that, the white Jutsu snuck into the ground. Hearing Madara, Ryo had a horrible hunch, immediately trying to sense the teleportation barrier mark left by him in the wave country. As he expected, it was without a trace. Although the ones he placed in Konoha should still be intact, Ryo couldn't fold space to that extent quite yet. He could just teleport from the Mist Village to Konoha. This is a big challenge this time. Ryo grinned and put back his contact lenses on. In his mind, he went over his hidden cards, for today, he had to face the entire Mist Village. Sure enough, as he was putting back his lenses, Yagura had already arrived, controlling the Sanbai, and leading a large group of mist ninjas to raid the hotel. On the other side, the Yuki clan were already dispatched, blocking the entire port and preventing Ryo from escaping. Ryo was using Shi's camouflage technique to hide his chakra. He was expecting to have more time. He never thought that Yamato would be a Zetsu in disguise. Ryo had no way to hide from the Mizukage. Facing the mist hunt, Ryo decided to trade his current playground with a larger one. After Yagura and the Yuki chief elder surrounded Ryo with their men, the latter once again disappeared in front of their eyes. This time, he went back to the location of a scalpel he placed inside the village. He found himself surrounded by dozens of mist ninjas. Looking at the Chunins and Jonins surrounding him, he immediately scattered a few ice scalpels around him and then entered the ice lightning chakra mode. A blue lightning bolt bounced back and forth between the scalpels, and the mist ninjas were all too late to react. After taking care of this obstacle, Ryo condensed an ice bow, and made an arrow in which natural energy gathered madly. After learning that Ryo was back at the village, Yagura and the chief elder of the Yuki clan quickly returned with their troops. As soon as they entered the village, Ryo released his arrow. Immediately, a crystal-clear ice flower grew bigger and bigger, trapping more and more mist ninjas. It's him! Ryo Yamanaka! Ryo's signature ice flower reminded some of the village's ninja of the Devil of Wave Country's battlefield. Yes, it's him! Run! Don't let that ice touch you! It's pity that those people spoke up a tad too late. Ryo shattered the ice flower, turning nearly 2,000 people who were trapped into it into blood-red ice mist. Ryo Yamanaka! Yagura, being the Mizukage, went into frenzy. He rushed towards Ryo with the Sanbai. The Yuki clan's chief elder also started his attack. The ice-release jutsus of this ninja were by no means comparable to those of Bing Yuki. Facing two Kage-tier ninjas and a Biju, Ryo chose to flee for the first time in his life. He instantly teleported to a nearby scalpel to avoid the first attacks. He didn't want to take on such powerful attacks all at once. He kept evading their attacks, popping up from time to time between the enemy mist ninjas. Each time he did so, he took away the life of a Jonin. Damn it! Old man, can't you limit his actions? Yagura said to the elder on his side. We're inside our own village. How could I do it without compromising the village's safety? Yagura didn't answer. Ryo was too fast for them to catch. What was most frustrating was that the battle was happening in their own village. The two indeed could not go all out. Aren't the Kagaya clan here yet? Yagura asked. Mizukage-sama. The Kagaya clan have arrived already, they're looking for a window to attack. Yagura nodded. The brute skill and the bone kekkei genkai of the clan should help limit Ryo's actions. Moreover, their techniques were different from the Elder's ice. They should not cause massive area damage to the village. At most, they would make holes here and there, and catching Ryo should be well worth that. Ryo had no idea of Yagura's clan. When he reappeared into a crowd of mist ninjas, 2 Kagaya clan members quickly jumped on him, catching his thighs. The surrounded mist ninjas all dispersed, followed by numerous bones popping around Ryo and the two, trapping them inside a bone cage. Ryo looked at the small cage and sneered, and then killed the two and prepared to teleport out. However, Yagura's next order made Ryo abandon the idea. It was because the Mizu cage ordered all the mist ninjas to attack Ryo with their water-release jutsus. Hearing Yagura's order, the ninjas all followed, and overwhelming amounts of water rushed towards Ryo. Ryo completely opened the yin seal, and the natural energy inside it poured out, freezing all that water. The ice slowly condensed under Ryo's control, first around his legs, then around his torso, followed by his arms and finally his head. A Ryo looking like ice giant appeared before of the mist village. As the ice colossus was formed, it closed its eyes and showed no movement. It then opened its eyes slowly, and scarlet 3 tomo appeared in its pupils. Chapter 154, Ice Colossus Returns. Ryo's body and mind quickly merged with that of the Ice Colossus. Unlike the last one he used, Ryo found that his new Ice Colossus was far stronger than before. The most obvious change was the chakra flow within it. The first time Ryo used this technique, the Colossus was entirely made out of natural energy and ice. This time, Ryo's chakra was flowing within the Colossus as if it was his own body. Then there was the change in natural energy. This Colossus's structure was far more stable than before, with the natural energy within it seamlessly going into its natural cycle with the external world. However, because of the massive structure of the Colossus, it was consuming the energy within the yin seal very quickly. Even with its bonding with the surroundings, this Colossus shouldn't last for any more than 10 minutes, which is double the time it lasted last time. Then, there was the outside of the Colossus. Ryo, naturally, couldn't see the outside appearance of the Ice Colossus. Before, he only heard Konoha's ninjas say it looked like him. This Colossus held even more resemblance to Ryo, looking exactly like him. With that, came the Sharinans, which Ryo did not notice. The Colossus clear showed Ryo's 3 tomo Sharinan. Moreover, his Sharinan was overflooded with natural energy, to the point it felt completely different from usual. Ryo found that he could see everything around him even more clearly. In fact, Ryo had pushed his 3 tomo Sharinan to the limit, getting them to their full potential. However, this evolution didn't go as far as awakening Ryo's Mangekyo Sharinan. The Mangekyo required enormous stimuli to be awakened. Madara and Izuna awakened their Mangekyo after their father's death. Itachi's Mangekyo was awakened when he witnessed the suicide of Shisui. Kakashi and Obito obtained the Mangekyo when witnessing Rin's suicide, while Sasuke obtained his witnessing the death of his brother. The opening of the Mankyo is always accompanied by great grief. Ryo didn't experience such a feeling yet. No matter how far he pushed his 3 tomo Sharinan, his eyes would not transform. The people in the Mist Village were all shocked by the appearance of this massive ice giant suddenly appearing in front of them. However, they couldn't feel any motion in the giant, which stood there just like a sculpture. Obviously, the Mist Ninjas couldn't sense natural energy. However, the Sanbai could. Although the current Sanbai had only 1/5 of its original soul, his sensitivity to natural energy was still beyond that of any Mist Ninja. As the Colossus was being formed, the Sanbai showed its irritation, but Yagura didn't seem to care about it that much. As soon as the Colossus was fully formed, Yagura found that he could no longer control the Sanbai. The Biju, witnessing the Colossus, was reminded of the Juobi, natural energy itself. For all 9 Biju, this would cause them to feel great alert. Yes, at one point of time they all were part of the Juobi. But after being separated from it for so long, none of them wanted to go back to that state. Feeling an existence akin to that of the Juobi, the Sanbai, whose perception was hindered by the fact that it was missing most of its soul, perceived Ryo as the Juobi. Ryo didn't notice the Sanbai's anomaly, as his attention was drawn by the memory that suddenly appeared in his mind. This was a memory from his mission in Ruran, when the Kyuubi told him about the Sanbai's secret. "Kid, you must remember that Isabu's character is actually peaceful and lazy, and that it never seeks fighting and killing. Therefore, his soul often falls into deep sleep, while his body relies on instinct to act. When that's the case, with just little guidance, one could control his actions. After the memory replayed in his mind, Ryo understood how Yagura was able to control the Sanbai, and how he was able to seal the Biju's soul so smoothly. While Ryo was still lost in memory, the Sanbai was out of control, just by the awakening of what was left of his soul. Most of the Biju's chakra was still there. He condensed a Biju Dhamma, and launched towards the ice colossus. Ryo saw the incoming threat, and raised the colossus's hand to catch the Biju Dhamma at the last moment. Boom! The Biju Dhamma exploded, fully sobering up Ryo. The ice colossus was composed of natural energy. A Biju Dhamma had no effect on it. However, the physical impact of its explosion was enough to make the colossus's right arm crack. Ryo immediately controlled natural energy, and in the blink of an eye, the crack was repaired. To everyone in the Mist Village, it looked like the colossus was intact after facing a Biju Dhamma. Monster! The regular ninjas all panicked. Ryo's ability to fend off the Sanbai's Biju Dhamma made the whole village fear him. He must hurry up and use this window, making the village admit defeat and let him go in under 10 minutes, just to have a chance to leave. While he was thinking of this, the Colossus's Sharingan was glancing at the Mist Ninja underneath, and looking at Yagura and the Sanbai. Feeling the great power of his newly enhanced form, Ryo felt more and more confident. He controlled the Colossus and rushed at the Sanbai. Seeing that, Yagura was shocked and immediately ordered all ninjas to bombard Ryo with all they had to stop his progression. In a heartbeat, all kind of attacks went straight to the Colossus's legs. Ryo was completely ignoring this level of attacks, letting the Colossus's legs take them head-on. Out of that, the Colossus was still unscathed, and its advance did not stop. Before anyone could react, it was in front of the Sanbai. Not so fast, kid! Ice release, ice crystal blast! The chief elder of the Yuki formed a lot of ice around the Colossus's feet, and then shattered it all. Unfortunately for the mist, this had no effect at all on the ice giant. Ryo controlled the Colossus, raising its arm, clenching its fist, and then bringing it down on Yagura. The Mizukage was agile enough, and easily evaded Ryo's attack. The fist fell on the ground, pulling it into a massive crater. Damn! This is too horrible. With such strength, this kid could destroy the village at will. The elder said anxiously. I can't believe it, this ice giant is stronger than the Sanbai. After that, Yagura controlled Isabu, making it roll into a ball and rush at Ryo. Ryo was far from being flustered, and his hands immediately blocked and held down the Sanbai. He then unrolled the Biju's body, then raised his fists and brought them down one after the other on the Sanbai's head. After 10 punches, the Sanbai was beaten, and could not move anymore. Ryo did not keep hitting it, but raised the Biju's whole body, throwing it at the Mist Ninjas. The poor ninjas were still in shock, and some of them had no time to avoid being killed by the Sanbai's body that fell over them. Yagura was biting his teeth, but he was absolutely powerless. The power of the Ice Colossus was beyond anything he ever imagined. Seeing the Sanbai being beat so easily, he fully understood what the elder meant when he mentioned that Ryo could easily destroy the village. He was enraged, but could only choose to compromise for the village's sake. Ryo Yamanaka, you won. Now leave our village. Ryo let out a sigh of relief hearing Yagura, for he had already been in this state for over 8 minutes, and he was running out of time. Chapter 155, Retreat. Although Yagura has admitted defeat, Ryo only had slightly over a minute in Ice Colossus. He could not afford to be reckless. The Mizukage ordered the Mist Ninjas to open a path for Ryo, and so they did. As Ryo was running away, the final bits of natural energy he had were beginning to dissipate, and he had to run over a hill, where he controlled ice to go off. Mizukage-sama, do you want us to trace him? Asked one of the Umbu. No, let him go. Yagura had decided to surrender. Yagura, that kid's ice giant is so powerful that it's likely to have some side effects or restriction on its user. It's better to trace him. The Yuki elder suggested. After a moment of contemplation, Yagura said, Umbu, send a team of 10 to track Ryo Yamanaka until you make sure he left the country. If you feel that he's weakened or hurt, immediately kill him. Yes, Mizukage-sama. Shortly after Ryo left the village, he disintegrated the Ice Colossus. He was in a far better state this time compared to what happened to him following his last use of the Colossus. At the very least, he didn't just collapse to the ground. When he used the Colossus against Shikaku, Ryo could not use ice or chakra. The overflow of natural energy forced his body to supplement his ice with chakra, and he couldn't use ice as the yin seal was exhausted. This time however, Ryo was able to separate the use of natural energy and chakra. Therefore, Ryo had no chakra loss, and was still able to use the lightning chakra mode. However, with the yin seal exhausted, he could no longer use the ice release or sage mode. Ryo was already at his limit just by entering ice elementization and ice teleportation. Once in ice elementization, any use of ice by Ryo would cost him a lot of chakra, just like it used to be for him before Jiraiya helped him make use of Kushina's yin seal in Mount Mayaboku. The only thing that didn't feel right was a faint sensation of pain all over his body. He didn't get this sort of pain the last time he used this technique. However, this level of pain wasn't going to affect his actions. After clearing his physical condition, Ryo was relieved. With the lightning chakra mode and ice teleportation, he should be able to retreat. After all, as long as he doesn't use ice, he could maintain the ice lightning chakra mode. Just as he was moving on from that, Ryo sensed that some people were trailing him. One of them seemed to be an elite jonin, while the other 9 regular jonin level. Ryo had already speculated that leaving the country wasn't going to be so easy, and that the mist should definitely send people behind him. He placed a few pre-made ice scalpels around and quickly blinked away, hiding his chakra. He kept looking from afar at the place where he used to be. The mist ninjas were not slow. In the blink of an eye, they were at Ryo's position. He discovered that these people were Umbu from the water country. Ryo smiled, for taking down the Umbu troop should make Yagura give up on the pursuit. Captain, he was just here, but after this point, his chakra disappeared. The censor ninja among the troop said to the elite jonin. She nodded, and looked around with caution. She had always felt that something was wrong with this place. It was just as she felt, for Ryo was about to bring death to this troop. Ryo chose to use ice teleportation to quickly kill this people. With them surrounded with ice scalpels, it should be a breeze. The first one he happened to kill was the censor ninja. This time, Ryo wasn't trying to take out their censor, he just happened to be the closest to one of Ryo's scalpels. With him falling, Ryo decided that didn't have to hide his chakra anymore, and he went right into the ice lightning chakra mode. The aura of lightning chakra around his body was so bright, it illuminated the night. All the elite Umbu saw was Thunderbolt flickering around, followed by all 8 of her remaining companions falling down dead in an instant. Ryo! Ryo Yamanaka! Her voice was somewhat trembling, and the impact of what she had just witnessed was just too great. A woman! Ryo, who was about to slit her throat, stopped. Woman, so what? Boil release, skilled mist Justu. She used a technique familiar to Ryo. Of course. Ryo saw this technique, and the figure or a green-eyed auburn-haired gentle smiling beauty popped up in his mind. He quickly blinked to another position escaping he attack. Seeing the strong corrosiveness of the jutsu, Ryo actually estimated that she was already quasi-cage tier. Mei Terumi was a very important figure for the Mist Village in the manga, and she was very appreciated by Ryo. Since she was an acquaintance, he wasn't going to kill her. He just flickered away with the ice lightning chakra mode. Mei looked at the corpses of her companions, and thought of Ryo's strength in horror. The gap between them was too great, and she could only helplessly sigh. After Ryo took down his chasers, he quickly reached the port of the water country. After confirming that there were no mist ninjas around, he used the transformation one again to pretend to be a merchant, and hired a boat and a crew to transport him. Ryo slowly sailed away on the boat once again. This time, he had captured the sanbai, and he was fully exhausted. After telling the crew not to disturb him in the cabin, Ryo quickly summoned Kajin and told her to guard him. And then, he got himself a much-needed good night's sleep. At noon the next day, Ryo, who had slept for over 10 hours, finally woke up. Kajin was doing her duty guarding him non-stop for all the time. After waking up, Ryo felt that the pain around his body relieved, but his muscles were still sore, like someone doing sports after a long period of non-activity. He quickly used a healing stone, but it had no effect. He didn't feel any less sore. This didn't have much impact on him, so he just left the matter to time, and went to talk to Kajin. Ryo, what's this place? It's beautiful. Kajin was very excited as she was seeing the sea for the very first time. This is the sea, Kajin. It's made up of water. Ryo explained with a smile. After getting Ryo's permission, she immediately flew out. Her flight speed was already fast, and with the lightning chakra mode, it wasn't inferior to that of Ryo. Kajin flew for a while, finding only water wherever she went. Ryo didn't care much about her explorations, and sat on the deck beginning to refill his yin seal. Natural energy was much more abundant in the sea. In just a few days, Ryo filled the yin seal by more than half. Translator note: Ryo relies mainly on water and wind natural energy. I believe that this is the reason why the sea was perfect. After a few more days of sailing, the boat finally arrived at the wave country. Chapter 156, Uchiha Madara. Konoha wasn't the only village with spies sent to the hidden mist. While Ryo was sailing towards the wave countries, those spies spread out the news about Ryo's battle against the entire village. This caused a great uproar across the entirety of the world of shinobi. One man took on the ninjas of one of the great 5 nations, who even had a Biju among their forces, and was able to emerge victorious. Most villages were dubious about this news, even Konoha's ninjas showed their doubts. The seniors in Konoha however were more concerned about something other than Ryo's victory, and that was the news that he had the Sharingan. Such a big event inevitably reached the Uchihas, whose leader, Kataki Uchiha went by himself to the 3rd Hokage to inquire about the matter. In a hole near the Earth Country, Uchiha Madara was receiving his own report. Hearing that Ryo survived the attack of the whole village with their Biju unscathed, Madara was quite surprised. Zetsu, you mean that this Yamanaka used a technique similar to that of the Akamika clan to enhance his combat power? Madara was going over all the key points. Yes, Madara-sama. What he did, was controlling the water attacks of the entire village to form a massive ice giant looking just like him. The giant is so powerful, it could block a Biju Dama with one hand. Block a Biju Dama? Interesting. I did say that I shall meet him if he survived. I will give you some of my power, and you bring him here. Yes, Madara-sama. Finishing his words, White Zetsu sank into the ground and disappeared. On his way to the wave country, Ryo had no idea of this discussion. After 2 more days, the boat Ryo had rented finally reached the wave country. In the country, Ryo only had to go a little further towards the borders with the fire country, in order to be able to use the teleportation barrier and directly return to Konoha. Over the course of those 2 days, Ryo was able to completely replenish the yin seal's stores of natural energy, and also recover from all muscle soreness he had. After the boat was docked, Ryo stretched out and jumped down to the ground. He entered Sage mode to perceive his surroundings, and was able to locate the village. With the enhanced perception from Sage mode, he was also able to locate 3 White Zetsu underground. Remembering the removal of his teleportation barrier mark in the wave country, Ryo was dissatisfied with the uninvited guests. Without hesitation, and knowing their location, he transmitted lightning chakra directly underground. The 3 were only Chunin tier, and facing such a powerful lightning attack, they could not escape, and were killed in seconds. Ryo then brought their corpses out of the ground. White Zetsu's body was infused with Hashirama's cell. His body could prove very valuable. Then, Ryo used Sage mode to perceive his body and carefully examined himself for Zetsu spores. After repeated inspections, he became sure that nothing was left on him. He was relieved, and started running towards the fire country. However, he had not taken a few steps when he saw White Zetsu once again. This time Zetsu had appeared directly in front of him, blocking his way. Ryo Yamanaka, I didn't expect you'd actually make it out from the attack of the entirety of the Mist Village. From Zetsu's mouth, Madara's voice came through, and his eyes looked like Sharingan's. At this time, after using Ice Colossus, Ryo's Sharingans peaked in strength, and he could see through their genjutsu with ease. It was obvious that Madara gave some of their power to Zetsu, who was perfectly suited to use this force as his whole body was infused with Hashirama's DNA. Ryo Yamanaka, come with me. As I said before, if you live after facing the Mist Village, you'll get to see me. Ryo did want to meet the legendary Madara. Moreover, he had ice teleportation and the teleportation barrier techniques, so he was not afraid to go and meet him face to face. After over 3 hours, Zetsu came to a hole while accompanied by Ryo. The hole was very dark. However, Ryo knew that with Madara's pride, he would never use such puny means and go for a sneak attack. With that in mind, Ryo just opened his Sharingan and followed Zetsu. In the deepest part of the cave, Ryo finally saw one of the final bosses of the Naruto verse, Uchiha Madara. At this time, his hair was all white, his face was covered with wrinkles, and he was sitting on a stone chair with pipe behind his neck connecting him to the Gadumazo behind him. In a way, it looked like his survival was a wonder. Even so, Ryo the chilling presence of peak Madara coming out of this old man. His Sharingan also held unfathomable power. On the other side, Madara was interested in Ryo as well. The kid's physique sometimes felt like ice, he had the ultimate 3-tomo Sharingan, and the lightning chakra mode of the Cloud Village. It's been a long time since I've seen such a talented young man. After a long time, Madara finally spoke. And I didn't expect the famous Uchiha Madara to still be alive. Oh! How do you know that I'm Madara? You look exactly like the statue in the Valley of the End, and I can't think of another man who could be this powerful at this age. Listening to Ryo, Madara smiled and said nothing. He stood up from his stone chair, and formed a massive dark blue arm. Madara-sama! You body, Zetsu was shocked seeing Madara go for the Susanoo. It's okay. I haven't seen such an interesting young man for long time. I don't know if you can take punch from me, Ryo Yamanaka. Finishing his words, the Susanoo's arm went straight towards Ryo. Ryo's face was heavy. He quickly condensed the moisture of the underground forming an ice shield, and injected it with great amounts of natural energy. While Madara did not learn Sage Mode, he had been sensitive to natural energy for many years. You actually use Senjutsu. Fascinating. As he finished his words, the Susanoo's fist landed on the shield. Oh, the ice shield became all cracked by the impact of such terrifying punch. However, it was not crushed, and Ryo was able to fend off Madara's attack. Madara-dono, it's my turn now I guess. Ryo entered Sage Mode, immediately forming a Raisin Shuriken. This is Wind Chakra, and Senjutsu Chakra. Madara looked up at Ryo, watching him forming his attack. Blue ribs appeared around Madara's body, and the Raisin Shuriken hit them. Countless wind blades were cutting the ribs, trying to get through. Madara's very calm expression finally changed. The destructive power of this jutsu exceeded all his expectations. Helplessly, he had to increase his consumption of chakra, making the Susanoo's arms appear and grab the Raisin Shuriken from both sides. With that, the attack finally exploded between the two hands, and dissipated. Chapter 157, The Deal. The Raisin Shuriken was blocked by Madara, and Ryo didn't continue to attack. The two stared at each other silently. Ryo was amazed that Madara still had such power at this old of an age. He realized that if the two were to really fight, he might be no opponent of this old man. However, Madara also had his views on Ryo changed. He did not expect that the young man in front of him would be so strong, and realized that he had to pay a price greater than what he had expected. After a while, Ryo became a little impatient. Did Madara just bring him here to kill him and hide his existence, or did he have another idea? He couldn't wait for him to speak anymore. Madara-dono, why did you call me here? After a brief moment of silence, Madara said, I told you, I wanted to see you. I'll be honest, I was also thinking of getting rid of you, the one who might have leads to my existence. However, I did not expect you to be so strong. Ryo was slightly surprised, as he didn't expect Madara to be so blunt. So, because of your strength and potential, I have changed my mind. Tell me, Ryo Yamanaka, would you be interested in making a deal? What kind of deal? I don't need anything, and I don't think I have anything you would want. Ryo did not refuse, but he didn't show real interest. It's a deal concerning your Sharingan. Madara's tone suddenly became more serious. My Sharingan? Ryo unconsciously reached for his own eyes. Yes, your Sharingan is already at the peak of its potential. With your talent, it is only a matter of time before you develop the Mangekyo. After that, you will have to pay for the strength you'll gain. Ryo heard Madara, and knew well that this strength gain will require a catalyst and a price, and that the price he would have to pay is his sight. Madara obviously had a method to go around this risk of going blind. In the manga, Obito was able to preserve his eyesight while using the Mangekyo endlessly. Indeed, Madara's following words confirmed Ryo's idea, Ryo Yamanaka, I have a way to conquer the blindness brought by the use of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Of course, in order for you to get my help, there are certain conditions. Madara's method should be nothing more than using Hashirama's cells. Out of caution however, Ryo still asked Madara about that method. Madara didn't hide anything, immediately talking about the effect of Hashirama's cells, including its effect on the Mangekyo user. After hearing that explanation, Ryo showed lack of interest, but then Madara's following words changed his attitude. It was because Madara mentioned that he had a method to make Hashirama's cells integrate perfectly with their bodies. The 1STS cells had great vitality, and that ever sought after vitality was itself the reason why the average person has no way to adapt with them. In the manga, only one person, Yamato, survived Orochimaru's experiments with those cells on infants, while Danzo couldn't suppress them anymore when seriously injured. This was all due to the fact that those cells' vitality was so strong, the regular human body could not bear them. Madara having a method to get people to fully integrate Hashirama's cells surprised and intrigued Ryo. Ryo never thought of conquering the hidden risks of Mangekyo before. But as he went back on Obito's perfect control of the cells, he believed Madara's claim. "I'm interested. So what are your conditions?" Ryo directly asked. "I want you to promise me two things: do not disclose about me to anyone. The second, I want you to protect the lives of two people, and not let anyone, including yourself, threaten their lives." Madara conditions were rather attractive. Ryo had no intention of telling anyone about him. As for the second condition, it shouldn't prove to be so difficult, but Ryo wasn't about to agree just yet. Instead, he cautiously asked, "Who are these two people?" "One is a boy in the Rain Country, an orphan who goes by the name of Nagato. The other is one you should already know. His name is Obito Uchiha." Hearing Obito's name, Ryo was shocked, and did not expect Madara to have noticed him just yet. "May I ask you why I should?" Ryo was really intrigued. "No." "Then, Ryo Yamanaka, do you agree to these terms?" "Hold on, I want to confirm one thing. If either of them provokes me, I cannot kill them." Madara seemed to have expected this question. He did not hesitate to say, "Yes, you cannot do anything to threaten their lives." "Isn't that too risky for me? If the two become my enemies, I would not be able to even protect myself or avenge my loved ones. I refuse this deal." "Then my terms will change. As long as they don't threaten your life or the lives of your loved ones, you cannot threaten theirs, and you must ensure their safety." Madara immediately answered, "And yes, there's one thing, when it's me or White Zetsu that's dealing with them, you don't need to interfere." Madara added one term. It took Ryo a while to nod and agree. He did not intend to change their fate that much. Without Madara's interference, he did know how long it would take Obito and Kakashi to activate his Sharingan. These terms were basically in line with Ryo's intentions, it would be foolish to refuse them. With that, the two finally made their deal. With that, Madara took out a scroll and handed it with a Zetsu arm to Ryo, who immediately opened the scroll to find the summary of Madara's research on Hashirama's cells. Madara's method to perfectly integrate Hashirama's cells into one's body consisted of reducing said cells' vitality and activity. Ryo opened his Sharingan and observed Zetsu's arm. He found that the activity of the cells within it was far less than that of the ones in Zetsu. What surprised him however, was that their vitality and chakra was unaffected. Ryo had his doubts, but he noticed that this arm was far more concentrated in Hashirama's cells than the Zetsu's body, and he finally had a general understanding of Madara's method. He had to admit, Madara was a true genius, far beyond his expectation. Madara used his Sharingan to suppress the activity of Hashirama's cells, what led to a significant reduction in their vitality and chakra. Then he cultivated the cells to increase their concentration, allowing for the overall vitality and chakra to be maintained. Ryo sealed the arm and the scroll, and Madara returned to his chair and closed his eyes ignoring him. "Madara Dono, you're giving me all of this, and are not afraid of my betrayal." Ryo couldn't just understand how Madara seemed to be so unbothered. "I believe my eyes, young man, you don't seem like the wrong person," Madara said, opening his eyes faintly. "Worthy of your reputation, Uchiha Madara." Ryo had more admiration for the old man in front of him. "The deal is done. Zetsu, lead him out." "Wait." Ryo didn't want to leave just yet, not while leaving behind another thing he wanted. Chapter 158, The Gadumazo's Arm. "What else do you want, Ryo Yamanaka?" Madara sounded a bit impatient. "Nothing much, I just want an arm of the big thing behind you." Ryo Yamanaka pointed at the Gadumazo. "What do you want with that?" Madara asked without hesitation. In fact, his heart was already quite turbulent. I felt such majestic vitality within that body. I have a jutsu I'm working on, and I need this vitality. Madara stared at Ryo for quite some time, and finally agreed to his request. Madara was sure that besides his Enzetsu, no one should know about the secret of the Juobi. He also needed Ryo in his new plan. Nagato and Obito were much more important than one arm of the Gadomazo. After all, he was counting heavily on Nagato to resurrect him with the Gado, Ryan Tensei no Jutsu. Madara was well aware after this encounter of Ryo's potential. Being so strong at such a young age, he should be more reliable than just Zetsu in protecting Nagato. And Obito was to be his heir and representative in the future. But at the moment, he was just too weak, and needed protection. Once his plan is completed, he'll have Obito with the Mangekyo, and Ryo protecting Nagato, and he should be completely relieved. Ryo had guessed what Madara should be thinking about with his knowledge of the original story. Therefore, he dared to directly make this request. As he expected, Madara agreed. He didn't act polite, and immediately jumped in and cut off the Gadomazo's right arm with Chidori. After sealing the arm, Ryo left the hole. After he had just left, Zetsu revealed his head from the ground and asked Madara in shock, "Madara-sama, how did you happily agree to give Ryo Yamanaka the arm made out of the Hashirama's cells? I have the cursed seal tag on this arm. Ryo should not find a way to have the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. If he directly integrates this arm, then he will only become my pawn later," Madara explained. "And what if he doesn't directly use it?" White Zetsu asked. "That means that we will have a Hashirama tier bodyguard to our pawns for free. Really wise Madara-sama. But the Gadoma? Do not worry about that. Our plan will take a long time to be implemented. By that time, the arm will be regenerated." After finishing his words, Madara closed his eyes and fell asleep. His assessment of Ryo's strength was very high. He indeed believed that he could grow to a level that's not shy of that of Hashirama. The Senjo were the ones hated the most by Madara. After all, his brother's life was taken by their hands. However, Madara did recognize their power. Ryo didn't know that Madara evaluated him so highly. After he followed Zetsu out, he immediately used his teleportation barrier and went to the Wave Country, and then rushed to the borders of the Fire Country. The only thing on his mind was studying this arm with Orochimaru. Ryo never thought of using the arm. To him, Madara was like a fisherman. He didn't want fishes from him, he wanted to learn how to fish himself. He already had an idea on the cells in this arm. His main purpose now was to find a way to make them. With the Ice Lightning Chakra mode and Ice Teleportation, it didn't take him long before reaching the borders of the Fire Country and then use the teleportation barrier to get immediately to the third training ground. Minato was there training with his team, and Shisui was also training with Kushina. Seeing Ryo's sudden emergence, none of them was surprised, as they were used to this from Minato. It didn't matter if they had another one who occasionally pops out of nowhere. "Ryo, you're back!" Kushina rushed over and patted his shoulders. "Sorry Ne-san, I still have something to do. I'll invite you over to barbecue tomorrow morning." As soon as he finished his words, Ryo disappeared. The people in the training ground were used to this, they just sighed and got back to what they were doing. Ryo had perceived that the ice scalpel he had once given to Anko was in Orochimaru's lab. "Who?" Ryo's sudden appearance took Anko off guard. She took a fighting posture and then got back to normal when noticing it was Ryo. "Couldn't just get in through the front door," Anko said. "Sorry, I'll do so next time. I'm looking for Orochi-san, where is he?" Anko pointed to the stairs leading to the underground, and Ryo rushed there immediately. Orochimaru was there conducting his research, and didn't react to Ryo's appearance. Ryo knew the Sunin's temper well, and didn't bother him. Instead, he went straight to using his equipment to start his research on the arm. After Orochimaru was through with the experiment at hand, he looked at Ryo. He had already noticed his arrival, but never had time to pay attention to him until now. Ryo was using his equipment skillfully. Orochimaru looked at the milky white arm in Ryo's hands, and interestedly cut off a portion of it to observe it. Doing so, Orochimaru was shocked by the chakra within this arm, which was very reminiscent of that in Hashirama's cells. Not long ago, Orochimaru got a few of Hashirama's cells from Danzo, but those were quickly used up by him for research. When Orochimaru went back to Danzo, the latter asked him to use Hashirama's cells to make him an arm. If he was to agree, Danzo would continue to provide him with more cells. Orochimaru did not immediately agree. Danzo's motive behind asking for the arm should surely be related to his ambition of becoming Hokage. Orochimaru was still very respectful to his sensei, and did not immediately agree. While he was still undecided, Ryo gave him a great surprise, bringing him such a large arm full of Hashirama's cells, enough to support his research for a long time. But then, Orochimaru found that there was something wrong with the cells in this arm. Whether it was in activity or vitality, they were not as good as Danzo's. Just as Ryo finished his observations, Orochimaru didn't tell him of this story about Danzo, and instead immediately asked, "Ryo-kun, what is this arm?" Ryo promised Madara not to expose his existence, so he skipped the part about how he found this arm and only described it. After hearing him, Orochimaru excitedly licked his lips and started a new study with Ryo. These specially treated cells were very exciting to him, as they should help him achieve great advancements in his studies. Ryo was very concerned about conquering the Mangekyo's price of use, that he didn't pay much attention to that. This way, before they realized anything, it went dark outside, and Ryo decided to leave Orochimaru's lab to return home. Chapter 159, Everyone's Support. As Ryo was about to leave, he was stopped by Orochimaru, who seemed to remember something. "Ryo-kun, tales of your battle against the Mist Village have spread out, and while you were using a technique similar to that of the Akamashi clans, your Sharingan was also exposed." Hearing Orochimaru, Ryo recalled using the Sharingan while using Ice Colossus, and realized that his secret had been leaked. Ryo knew all too well that once his Sharingan would be exposed, he'll definitely have trouble. "Orochi-san, have the Uchiha harassed my mother in the past few days?" Ryo asked a little anxiously. "Yes, but they were stopped by Minato and Kushina." Knowing that his mother had the protection of those two on top of his clans made Ryo feel a lot less worried. "Orochi-san, the Hokage Sarutobi-sensei has appeased the Uchiha clan's head, but other members of the tribe are still very dissatisfied." Orochimaru carried on talking, telling Ryo what he knew. Ryo understood that higher-ups of the village were now divided into two factions. Danzo and Homura sided with Uchiha, while Koharu took Hiruzen's side. The Uchiha do not allow their bloodline to spread into other clans. According to their internal rules, Ryo must now return to his clan, or abolish any signs of the Uchiha bloodline. Of course, their bloodline was reflected in his Sharingan. Not returning to the clan meant that he had to pluck out his eyes. Those familiar with Ryo knew that he would never want to rejoin the clan. In the high-level meeting about the matter, Danzo and Homura were clearly showing their support of the Uchiha's case. As a result, Kushina was enraged. This evolved into her colliding with Danzo. Minato wasn't about to stop her, Jiraiya hadn't come back yet, Orochimaru and Sakumo weren't interfering either. Helplessly, the third had to interfere himself and stop the raging Kushina. This made her furious, and left on the spot, slamming the door behind her, with Minato following after her. After that, Kushina and Minato both publicly stepped up to stop the Uchiha. The red-hot habanero and Konoha's yellow flash were not people that the Uchiha clan could afford to offend. They could only choose to temporarily retreat. After listening to Orochimaru, Ryo was very touched by Kushina and Minato's unconditional support. This was especially true with Minato, who had always been most loyal to the village, and was now willing to go against its higher-up just for Ryo's sake. This made the latter very moved. "It wasn't just those two supporting you." Anko came down the stairs, speaking in an awkward tone. Ryo looked back at her, and she continued, "In fact, Orochimaru-sensei, Jiraiya-san and Sakumo-san all have been to the Uchiha's district." "Orochi-san, you." "We went to the clan's head to talk about your issue. He promised that there will be no reason to pursue the matter of your identity if you could get the clan's elite to accept that." Ryo knew that things were not as simple as Orochimaru was describing. A heavy price must have been paid to make the Uchiha clan's head promise such a thing. However, Ryo was wrong. There was indeed a small price, but the Uchiha were the ones who had to pay. Before the three went to the clan, they all thought of what they should do. Jiraiya was concerned with the fact that they were still at war. If this matter was to cause too much conflict with the Uchiha clan, it would be too harmful to the village. His suggestion was to persuade the Uchiha to leave this matter to be discussed after the war ends. Sakumo on the other hand did not agree with that. The Uchiha at the time had no Kage tier ninjas at the time. They only had a few quasi-cage tier ninjas. The three of them should be able to annihilate the entire clan. If they don't obey, they'd just beat them into obedience. As for Orochimaru, he just wanted the matter to be handled quickly so he could go back to the lab and continue his research. If it wasn't Ryo's who's involved, he would have been too lazy to even give the matter any attention. Each one of the trio had his own thoughts. When they entered the district, and met Kataki Uchiha, Jiraiya gave his proposal, but unfortunately, it was refused. Seeing that reason wasn't working, Sakumo no longer hesitated. Orochimaru also felt that it would be easier to handle the issue in Sakumo's way. The two subdued the majority of the Uchiha's ninjas present. In the end, Kataki agreed to let Ryo off as long as he could convince their elite clansmen. After knowing all the circumstances, Ryo bid farewell to Orochimaru and Anko and used the teleportation barrier to get straight home. As soon as he returned, he headed straight to Chin's room. Unsurprisingly, as soon as she saw her son, she immediately began talking about the matter of his identity. Ryo was all she had in life. Facing such a matter, she became anxious and her life turned into chaos. Now, as she finally got to see her son, he poured the contents of her heart to him. Ryo was staring at his mother, who was actually looking older because of all the stress this brought down on her. It was very distressing. The image he always had of his mother was that of this calm, strong woman. It was the first time he ever saw her be so flustered. In fact, to Chintz, the experience of bringing up Ryo had put under tremendous pressure. For a decade and a half, their secret had been like a boulder upon her heart. She was just a Takubutsu jonin that's good at medical ninjutsu. The Uchiha was one of the two eldest clans of the village. It was a behemoth, frightening to go against, even for the entire Inoshikacho alliance. The huge power gap forced her to remain vigilant at all time. Now, the exposure of her son's identity was the final straw that finally broke her down. The day for her to face the Uchiha clan finally came. The anxiety made her collapse over the past days, turning her extremely gaunt. However, everyone's support helped her a lot. Hearing what Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Sakumo have done was especially comforting. Chintz was a young medical ninja in the Second World War, fighting under these men. Sakumo and the Sunin were synonym to omnipotence to her generation. Mom, you can rest assured. I can protect you. Now, I'm at the tier of the great Sunin. I'll never let anyone hurt you. Hearing her son, her tense eyebrows finally relaxed, and she finally showed a faint smile. Ryo's words made her relax completely. She believed him, and him being at that level, convinced her that he could handle all of this. From then on, Ryo remained with his mother in her room until she fell asleep. After coming out of the room, Ryo's scarlet eyes glowed in the dark. He was never a saint, and he definitely wasn't about to become one as his mother and clan are being threatened. Now, all he wanted was to use his own strength, so that Chintz would never be disturbed by anyone ever again, and could have a happy life. Chapter 160, Solutions. At Ryo's request, everyone gathered in the third training ground. Ryo expressed his gratitude to everyone, and then proposed his solution. His method was simple: face the entire village with his own strength. In reality, Ryo didn't have a problem with the clan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have friends and a disciple who are Uchiha. If it wasn't his life and the life of his loved ones being put at stake, Ryo would never take the initiative to make conflict with the Uchiha. But now, it was certainly no time to be friendly. Ryo, you should calm down first. You're being too impulsive going into this. Facing the entire clan on your own, whether you win or lose, could only bring more problems and make your conflict with the clan intensify. Minato was first to object. Ryo, Minato is right. If you go straight at them and lose, they would naturally never let you go. If you win in an all-out battle against them in public, they would become less prone to agree. Sakumo added. If they don't agree, just beat them more. I will be on your side, and I'll never let them touch my apprentice's eyes. Kushina immediately announced she'll be fighting alongside Ryo. Please Kushina, don't make it even more problematic. Ryo, have you ever thought about the fact that you're in conflict with them while the village is in war? What would a conflict with the Uchiha mean for the village? Jiraiya spoke seriously to Ryo. Jiraiya-san, this was all I could think of. I have to solve this problem as soon as possible. I can't let my mother suffer any longer. Ryo was very resolved. Jiraiya knew him very well. He knew that he wasn't kidding around this time, and he could only sigh and not answer. You're all thinking wrong. There is no need for Ryo-kun to face the Uchiha all out in public. The ever-silent Orochimaru finally spoke. Orochimaru-san, what do you mean? Minato was puzzled. Make Sarutobi-sensei talk with Uchiha Kataki. He could convince him to get Ryo fighting the Uchiha in secret. Not only will this preserve the clan's reputation, it will also solve Ryo's problems. As everyone heard Orochimaru's idea, they felt it was rather good. This should not be delayed. Let's go to the old man now. Jiraiya said to Orochimaru, who nodded and went with him to the 3RDS office. While this was happening, the third was all worried about Ryo's problem. After he received the information on Ryo's battle, he issued an order to keep it secret. However, the information still managed to spread. Now, all the clans in Konoha know that Yamanaka blood runs through Ryo's veins. The third kept being on Ryo's side all the way through. If that wasn't the case, he wouldn't try to appease Kataki. However, he wasn't about to go against the Uchiha clan. Just as he was feeling that he had his hands tied, his two disciples arrived at his office. Jiraiya and Orochimaru came through the door and explained the plan. The third also felt that this was a good way, and immediately agreed to talk about this with Kataki. The specifics of what the two talked about were not revealed, but an umbu was sent by the third to tell Ryo that the following day will be the day when he and the Uchiha will put an end to everything. The next day, Ryo went on his own to the Uchiha's district. He didn't want to drag anyone along with him. Upon reaching the district, he found Kushina, Minato, Sakumo, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya all waiting for him. He couldn't help but get watery eyes at this sight. He was truly moved by everyone's presence. Ryo, I'm your sensei. I have the responsibility to protect you. Kushina said awkwardly, while patting Ryo's shoulder. Minato ni-san. Minato was a candidate to become the following Hokage. His presence here today meant that he was completely giving up on the Uchiha's support. Well, how can I put it? I think you're more important to me than the Uchiha clan, and Kushina forced me to come along. Minato said with a smile. Neither Sakumo nor Orochimaru were good with words. The two remained silent, leaving their actions speak for them. As for Jiraiya, he said that he just feared that Ryo would go out of control hurting too many Uchihas too much, and that he just had to be there for their rescue. No one bought that. Jiraiya didn't know medical ninjutsu. How would he even come to their rescue? In this way, the group of 6 walked toward Uchiha Kataki. Uchiha Kataki's feelings were complex. He felt angry, excited, but also a bit hopeful. He had been fighting alongside Ryo, and was very aware of his strength, and especially his potential. After learning that Uchiha blood ran through Ryo's veins, Kataki's first reaction was anger just like everyone else. The Uchiha's blood is absolutely not allowed to flow out of the clan. However, after going back over Ryo's talent, he started thinking that this was an opportunity for the clan to rise. To him, Ryo's talent was comparable to that of Uchiha Madara. If he would get back to the clan, the Uchiha would return to its former glory in just a few years. Today, the Uchiha brought in 5 elite Jonins, and 5 Quasi Kages, all having the 3 Tomo Sharingan. He didn't think that Ryo had a chance to win. Ryo's group arrived, and the one who was supposed to receive Ryo was shocked to see this lineup. He was ought to be shocked. Besides the third Hokage, every Kage tier in Konoha was coming his way. These 6 could destroy the entirety of the clan. He was just a lower tier Uchiha, who was assigned to for reception and to immediately inform Kataki of Ryo's arrival. Eve, everyone, welcome. He stuttered, very cautiously greeting the lot. It wasn't that he was timid, but he had seen a demonstration of Sakumo and Orochimaru's strength just a few days earlier. Receiving the news, Kataki's face changed as he immediately rushed to his door. Seeing the 6 all together, he started losing his calm. Welcome Kataki Dono. Jiraiya saw Kataki coming from behind the door and greeted him enthusiastically. Kataki's heart was broken. This is my home, my district. How dare an outsider welcome me, he thought. Sakumo looked back at Jiraiya, realizing how inappropriate he was acting. He held his laughter and did not speak. Then Kataki left the house with a group of other Uchiha and guided Ryo's group. The battle was set to take place in the forest beyond the district, where Ryo found Shisui before. Upon everyone's arrival at the spot, they found Kataki's group of elite Uchiha waiting over there. Ryo looked at the 9 before him and turned back to Kataki, "Will you also fight?" "Of course, this old man is also an Uchiha, you know." Kataki nodded. "That makes 10 of you. So, are you going at me together, or one after the other?" Chapter 161, Ryo vs the Uchiha. Ryo's world made the Uchiha's faces go heavy. Here were 5 Hokage, 5 elite Jonins, all with 3 Tomo Sharingan. Even the third Hokage wouldn't look down on them like this. Of course, Ryo was saying that to keep his momentum. Besides, anger often makes people lose their senses, which might prove beneficial for Ryo's sake. "Stop with the puny tricks, Ryo Yamanaka. And you guys calm down." Kataki saw through Ryo's thoughts, and comforted the Uchiha elite besides him. Ryo nodded, with some admiration to the clan's elder. "Kataki Dano, as long as Ryo beats the 10 of you, the clan won't be asking questions about his bloodline. Am I right?" Sakumo asked seriously. "Of course. And there's no need for him to beat all 10 of us. If Ryo Yamanaka beats 8 of us, we will not bother him," Kataki said with confidence. After agreeing on details, the battle between Ryo and the Uchiha began. The first one to fight was an elite Jonin who remained silent as he moved forward. The two sides didn't exchange any words at all. Usually against a Jonin, Ryo's use of the Ice Lightning Chakra mode is enough to end the battle in an instant. However, this Uchiha has the 3 Tomo Sharingan. His eye's dynamic vision was able to capture Ryo's movements, and he was able as a Jonin to keep up with him physically, and successfully fend off Ryo's first Ice Lightning Chakra mode attack. The Jonin obviously knew very well that he had no chance against Ryo. His mission was to make his opponent use up as much chakra as possible. After blocking Ryo's first strike, he used his Sharingan to put Ryo under the effect of Genjutsu. Facing this level of Genjutsu, Ryo didn't even have to rely on his Genjutsu, and he easily broke away from it. From then, Ryo easily finished the first battle. The next few Uchiha sent in were elite Jonins and Hokage, all sharing the same mission as the first one. They were all trying to push Ryo to use as much chakra as possible. After having victory against the 7th opponent, Kataki himself walked forward. This was a ninja fit to become the Uchiha's clan head. Obviously, he had fought alongside Ryo on the Lightning Country's battlefield, and was still familiar with him. He had said before, that as long as Ryo beats 8 of them, the Uchiha would turn a blind eye to his bloodline. Choosing to be the 8th opponent meant that he certainly had enough confidence to not only his capability to beat Ryo in this battle, but to also make him unable to win the following ones. Ryo understood Kataki's thoughts pretty well. As the previous 7 seemed to be just trying to exhaust Ryo, then Kataki must certainly have an ace up his sleeve. Ryo hesitated for a while, and then chose to start out strong. He didn't know Kataki's hidden card, but he wasn't the type to back down knowing that. His Ice Lightning Chakra mode became far more furious as his Lightning Chakra became more violent. And then he threw an ice scalpel at Kataki, all while condensing a Raiden, Raise-Non. If that would hit Kataki, it would be instantly Ryo's victory. Translator note: my understanding is that this Raiden, Raise-Non is to the Denjiki Raise-Non what the Futon, Raise-Non is to the Raisin Shuriken. Knowing that Ryo would be using the Flying Thunder God, Kataki evaded to right immediately after seeing the ice scalpel. Ryo already guessed that move, so he followed that initial scalpel with 2 other ones to its right and left. Seeing that another scalpel was approaching him, Kataki was a little surprised, but did not panic. Ryo didn't know why Kataki was so calm. Did he have a way to dodge? Or was he luring Ryo into a trap? He wanted to take a pause and think, but he couldn't afford to do so, and his attack didn't stop. Leaving another ice scalpel in place, Ryo teleported to Kataki's right, and immediately went for his back with the Raise-Non. What he did not expect was that the Raise-Non disappeared immediately before hitting Kataki's back, who took the chance to turn around and used his blade to pierce through Ryo's lungs. Being in ice elementization, Ryo didn't take any real damage, and moved back to his initial spot, stating at Kataki. Kataki was a bit shook at this time. His blade obviously penetrated through Ryo's body. But Ryo didn't look in any way like someone who just had his lung be pierced. Recalling what just happened, Kataki did feel like his blade was literally piercing through ice. "Ryo Yamanaka, he wanted to ask, but stopped. He knew that what the secret was, Ryo wasn't going to tell him about it. At the same time, Ryo was also eager to know what the disappearance of the Raise-Non was all about. He could only think of time-space jutsus like those of Minato, or the Mangekyo Sharingan's Kamui. Did another Uchiha activate a Mangekyo like that of Obito? Ryo's heart was full of doubts, but his battle against Kataki was not over yet. Ryo was ready to go back into fighting, when Kataki admit defeat all of a sudden. "You've won, Ryo Yamanaka." "I admit defeat." Hearing this sentence felt awkward to Ryo. Kataki was still in a strong spot, but he surrendered. Although he was pretty puzzled, Ryo didn't care much, and Kataki's admit of defeat meant that Ryo was free to use his Sharingan. "Do you want to continue?" Ryo looked at Kataki. Chu wanted to refuse, but Fugaku stepped up at the same time. "Kataki-sama, I want to try." "You've already made Ryo Yamanaka use a lot of his chakra, and his spirit is also a bit wilting. I can beat him with my genjutsu and prove our name." Hearing Fugaku's words, Kataki gave the matter a thought and then agreed. Fugaku was probably becoming the clan's next head, and he had to take every opportunity to accumulate experience. Ryo watched Fugaku walk forward with some vigilance. Back in the Battle of Kikyo Pass, he felt a great threat from him. With that, along with his knowledge of the anime, Ryo guessed that Fugaku probably had already opened his Mangekyo Sharingan. However, Ryo felt that the disappearance of his Raise-Non was not Fugaku's doing. Because the abilities of Mangekyo are rather similar between relatives, Fugaku's Sharingan should be more similar to that of Sasuke and Itachi. Fugaku's hidden strength should rise once he opens his Mangekyo. With it, this man should be probably capable to fight a Kage tier. If he could, Ryo would not fight Fugaku. After all, the man gave him a lot of help in secret. "Ryo, let's begin," Fugaku said, as his Sharingan flashed, forming a special different pattern. Chapter 162, Fugaku's Mangekyo. As soon as Fugaku activated his Mangekyo, Ryo's consciousness was pulled into a special space. The space's color was a peculiar red. There were the ruins of a building, and at its door was Fugaku, who had a hint of sadness on his face. "Ryo, this is where my father and I grew up. Unfortunately, now, it's abandoned," Fugaku-san Denli said. "Fugaku-san, is this?" Ryo wanted to confirm that this space was that of the Tsukuyomi. "Oh yeah, I didn't mention that. This is the illusion space created by my Sharingan, my Mangekyo Sharingan." Fugaku's eyes turned into its Sharingan's pattern. Ryo looked at his eyes with some curiosity. Fugaku thought Ryo didn't know about the Mangekyo, so he went ahead and explained the matter to him. The Mangekyo is the result of the Sharingan's evolution. It can greatly enhance its initial powers, while granting the owner some unique techniques. Ryo nodded, he knew all of this already. "Fugaku-san, is there a reason why you pulled me into this space?" Ryo asked with some curiosity. "Well, Ryo, I want you to lose to me. This will be very helpful to me to confirm that I get the position of the Uchiha's clan head." Fugaku didn't hide his intentions, cutting straight to the chase. "You want to be the clan's head, Fugaku-san?" Fugaku was already the clan's head in the manga on the Kyuubi's attack night. However, Ryo didn't remember the exact time of his election being stated. "Well, currently, I don't have that much credit in the family. So I'll need your cooperation, and that you deliberately lose to me." "Well, win or lose, I've had what I wanted." "Alright." Fugaku had helped Ryo a lot in the past, so Ryo wasn't about to refuse his request. "Thank you, Ryo. Fugaku-san, you've helped me a lot, and also, I rather have my uncle be the Uchiha's head over it being a stranger," Ryo said quickly. Fugaku smiled and said nothing. "Right, Fugaku-san, do you know how Kataki Dano just made my Raise-Non disappear?" "That, I don't know. This is the first time I see that technique as well," said Fugaku after giving the matter some thought. "Kataki Uchiha, that old man is too sinister. He actually prepared such a jutsu just for this battle." Ryo remembered the battle and just couldn't help but be surprised. After that, the two of them talked about the matter of chintz. Fugaku wanted to visit her with his wife and child after the end of the battle. Thinking it over, Ryo agreed, as he had no reason to refuse such a visit. "Fugaku-san, what's your Mangekyo's ability? If you're bothered by the question, don't tell me." Ryo immediately regretted asking this question and added that last sentence. "There's nothing to bother me. My left eye's ability is Amaterasu, and my right's ability is Tsukuyomi that forms this genjutsu space. Fugaku didn't hide anything. Tsukuyomi, and Amaterasu, the same as Itachi. By the Mangekyo itself looks different. Ryo thought. Ryo, we're almost out of time. It takes me a lot of mental strength to maintain this technique. I've just started using this jutsu, and I'm not strong enough to maintain it much longer. Today's conversation ends here, we'll talk when I visit your place. Alright. Ryo nodded, and Fugaku released the Tsukuyomi. The two have been talking for so long, but it was only a minute to the people outside. All they saw was Ryo and Fugaku being all motionless. But everyone there was the best of the elite. They all knew that it was a genjutsu matchup. Suddenly, Ryo's face started getting pale. Fugaku's forehead was sweaty, but he looked better, as if he was winning. Ryo's face became paler and paler, and he started to pant, while Fugaku on the other hand was a lot more at ease. Kataki was shocked. He didn't expect that Fugaku had reached such a level. He started thinking that if he and the younger man were to face each other, Fugaku might just be the one to emerge victorious. Finally, this genjutsu matchup ended with Ryo fainting on the spot. When Minato saw Ryo faint, he flickered in and took him back to his group. Ryo was an elite medical ninja, and he had no trouble faking have a serious mental trauma. Orochimaru was relieved as he examined him, and then said, Ryo-kun's spirit had been hit hard. That's why he fainted. But it's nothing serious, he should be okay after a few days of recovery. Everyone heard that there was nothing wrong with Ryo. Every one of the Uchihas present applauded Wicked Eye Fugaku, for saving face and preserving the name of the Uchiha clan. Kataki looked at Ryo in Minato's arms and sighed. Then he turned back at Fugaku showing a happy smile. Although he wasn't able to take Ryo into the clan, confirming the clan's next head was enough to be happy about. He then turned to everyone, announcing that the matter of Ryo having Uchiha blood shall not be pursued. Hearing such a satisfying answer, Ryo left the village in the hands of Minato. Ryo shouldn't go back home in this state, so Minato was planning have him spend the night over at his place. But Orochimaru suddenly showed a strange smile, one that disappeared too quickly for anyone to notice it, except for Minato. Then he proposed that he should be the one taking care of Ryo for the night. Minato remembered Orochimaru's smile and looked at Ryo, thinking of what the matter might be. Kushina, we should let Orochimaru-san take him with him. Come home and I'll explain the matter to you. Kushina was not at ease, but quickly chose to trust Minato. Orochimaru returned Ryo to his own house. He casually put him on a chair and looked at him with a wicked smile. Ryo-kun, when are you going to drop the act? Orochimaru licked his lips and said. Orochi-san, how did you figure it out? My act should have been perfect. Ryo opened his eyes, and his initially pale face gradually turned as rosy as usual. Who can take heavy mental trauma and keep his breathing so smooth? It was just like you are asleep. Orochimaru pointed at the flaw in Ryo's act. Ryo realized where he goofed, and embarrassedly scratched his head. Orochimaru didn't ask Ryo why he helped Fugaku, but instead invited him to continue the research on Hashirama's cells. Ryo agreed and went with him to the lab. On the other hand, in Minato's house Kushina was so surprised. But Ryo's face was so pale. His breathing was smooth, untypical of people in trauma. But he was able to really pull off a great act. If wasn't for Orochimaru-san's smile, I wouldn't have noticed it. As she learned from Minato that there was nothing wrong with Ryo, Kushina was finally completely relieved. Chapter 163, The Mission of Team Minato. After solving the matter with the Uchiha, Ryo and Orochimaru became devoted to studying Hashirama's cells. These cells were very important to Ryo. He had no siblings, and no imaginable way to ever get the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. For now, his only way was Hashirama's cell, so he had to study them thoroughly. In his battle against the Uchiha, Ryo felt that his three-tomo Sharingan was at the edge, with its power about to overflow. He was just a catalyst away from unlocking the Mangekyo Sharingan. After studying the cells weakened by Madara, Ryo decided not to follow his method. While this method could effectively alleviate the risk involved with using Hashirama's cells, it also greatly reduced their utility. In order to use the Mangekyo without the risks involved with that, Ryo had to have a huge amount of Hashirama's cells in his body, close to half. That wasn't what Ryo wanted. He didn't want his body to be occupied by someone else's cells. Ryo's idea was go find a way to get his cells to have the proprieties of those of Hashirama. There were leaps and bounds between Hashirama's cells and regular ones. Every one of the first Hokage's cells had great vitality. It would be impossible for regular person to change his cell to ones similar to those of the first, but Ryo theorized that it could be possible to him through ice elementization. The main use of this technique to Ryo was to absorb natural energy and change the structure of his cells. Since it was done in one way, it might be done in another. With enough natural energy, Ryo thought that he might be able to imitate the structure of Hashirama's cells, to give his own stronger vitality and keep himself from going blind. With that in mind, Ryo kept analyzing the DNA structure of the first cells to isolate the genes responsible for his vitality. Of course, the human genome is vast, and their research wasn't making progress for a while. In the meantime, Danzo came over for Orochimaru several times, solely to persuade him to make him an arm made out of Hashirama's cells. Because of his interaction with Ryo, Orochimaru was very different from what he was like in the manga, and wasn't conducting any human experiments. Danzo wasn't able to control Orochimaru, so he could only ask him to help him politely. For this reason, he had to use all his cards and offer him the notes Tobirama's research on the 1st cells. Orochimaru was very eager to take these notes, and finally agreed to help him with making the arm. Ryo and Orochimaru's research made great progress after obtaining the notes, and they were finally able to isolate the genes responsible of their vitality. After Ryo extracted the genes, Ryo activated his Sharingan and memorized the structure of the cells with the help of Orochimaru's lab's microscope. However, Ryo wasn't eager to try his method as he wasn't sure yet of its feasibility. Later, he and Orochimaru experimented with mints and monkeys, and the results were very promising. After changing the cell structure of the two animals, they began to show extraordinary vitality. After 2 more days of observation, Ryo determined that the animals weren't suffering from side effects. They were the same as before, just with more vitality. The experiment was a complete success. The one problem that they had was that this change only brought the animals' vitality. The immense chakra of Hashirama should have another gene that's responsible of it. However, they couldn't find any way to duplicate that which was inherited in the Senjo clan. Although they had some disappointment, Ryo and Orochimaru were extremely satisfied with their results. They had managed to use scientific research to successfully find a way to reproduce Hashirama's vitality, without any side effect. In this world where everything relied on chakra, what they had accomplished was a great achievement. Ryo soon calmed down. Although their experiment was a success, it wasn't time to apply it yet. First, he didn't have enough chakra to support the transformation. And second, he hadn't opened his Mangekyo yet. After the experiment was completed, Orochimaru started working on making an arm from the 1st cells. He used the original cell that Danzo had given him, which meant that he was going to produce the same arm he made in the manga. Ryo was far from being involved with this process. He finally got to leave the lab after a whole month. He had to squint to adapt with the sunshine, for he had not seen it all that time. He entered Sage mode to locate people around. After confirming that Shisui and Kushina were in the 3rd training ground, he used the teleportation barrier to get there. "Hey Kushina Ne-san, Shisui, how are you?" "Well, we're all good." Kushina was immune to the sudden appearance of Ryo and Minato, and casually answered Ryo. "Hello sensei." Shisui was as respectful as ever to Ryo. "I haven't seen you for a while Shisui. You seem to have gotten stronger. You must have been working very hard recently." "No, it's all thanks to Kushina-san. All this time she had been fighting against me, so my strength increased so fast." Shisui was very grateful to Kushina. "Don't mention it. Your sensei wasn't here, so I should teach you. I'm your sensei's sensei you know." Kushina laughed out loud. By the way, where are Minato and Kakashi? After the three spent a while chatting, Ryo remembered that he could not locate Minato or his team, and casually asked. "Minato took them to do a task," Kushina said with some envy. Being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, even though she was proficient at using most of its Biju's power, Kushina couldn't leave the village as she wanted. She knew that very well, and could only envy her boyfriend. "What mission?" Ryo's heart dropped. "I don't know the specifics. I just heard Minato talking about it," Kushina said after some thought. "Kushina Ne-san, has Kakashi been promoted to the rank of Jonin?" "Ah yes. I gave him a seal scroll." Heeding that, Ryo's doubts were confirmed. What Minato and his team were going to was the Battle of Konoha Bridge. Ryo had no intention to change Obito's upcoming fate. He wanted him to awaken his Mangekyo with the help of Madara. But since he was too focused on research, he lost track of time and forgot about protecting Rin. Ryo felt helpless. In order to ensure that his plans were to be foolproof, he decided to go to Konoha Bridge. Chapter 164, The Battle of Konoha Bridge. In the manga, the Battle of Konoha Bridge marked the birth of two Sharingan-wielding heroes. One used his to copy over 1,000 jutsu, to become known as the Akapi ninja, Kakashi of the Sharingan. The other was Obito Uchiha, whose name was engraved on the village memorial stone to immortalize as one of the village's fallen heroes. It was a decisive battle, one that completely changed the lives of both. It was also the battle that laid down the seeds for the future events to take the shinobi world by storm. Ryo, as one who had quite the idea of the future, was fully aware of the importance of this battle. However, he didn't intend to change Obito's fate at this point of time. The reason was simple: if things were to be left to develop as they did in the manga, Obito would end up with the Mangekyo. Obito's Mangekyo had a special ability, Kamui, which could be described as the ultimate hack in the Naruto verse. The principle of Kamui was very simple. It was able to transfer his body and objects in contact with it back and forth between this world and Kamui's own dimension. This ability could make him transfer his body partially back and forth between both dimensions, granting him an almost innate invincibility and allowing him to ignore all attacks. Ryo's plan was to use Rin's death to get Obito to activate his Mangekyo, and then change his fate after that point in time. The key to this plan was Rin. Rin, Kakashi, and Obito were the few friends that Ryo had in life. He definitely was not going to let her die. Whether or not he could save Rin, was something that completely relied on the ace up his sleeve that he had prepared. According to the events in the manga, after the end of this battle, Kakashi and Rin should be able to return safely to Konoha. But Ryo was still not at ease, and wanted to go to join them just in case Rin would be in danger. The current state of the Naruto world had changed a lot. Because of Ryo's and Sakumo's presence, Konoha was emerging as the sole victor of the war, and the terms of the Fire Countries' treaties with other countries were a lot more in favor on Konoha. However, many consistencies with the original timeline were still there. The Rock Village sent thousands of ninjas harassing the Fire Countries' borders to force Konoha to its own terms. Now, just like in the manga, the Rock's main motive was getting more cards in their future negotiations with Konoha. However, their attempts were doomed to fail. When Ryo arrived at the battlefield, he happened to witness Minato using the Flying Thunder God to slay dozens of rock ninjas, including 3 Jonins, in the blink of an eye. Ryo did not make his presence known. As he watched Minato in this battle, he was further shocked and surprised. He didn't expect that Minato would get even stronger. At his early 20s, Minato developed the Flying Thunder God to the extreme. In his past life, Ryo often heard that the fasters would emerge victorious in martial art combat. Minato was the epitome of speed, putting that on full display. Ryo had always thought that Minato should be only slightly stronger than him in Sage mode. However, after witnessing his battle, he realized that he was completely mistaken. Before this battle, Ryo was feeling that the strongest in Konoha was still the third at the time, followed by Sakumo and Minato, then the Sannin and himself. However, now it seemed to him that Minato was absolutely stronger than the third, becoming the absolute strongest ninja in Konoha. If the current Minato was to face pain at his peak while knowing his secret, Ryo thought that Minato would stomp. After Minato killed this group, he immediately went to support other Konoha ninjas. Ryo didn't continue to watch this show, but rushed to Konoha Bridge. Konoha Bridge was in the Grass Village's territory, and a vital pathway to the Rock's line of supply. Kakashi's trio's mission was to blow up the bridge. This would put the Rock ninjas in the front line on their own with no supplies. They should put them in a position where they struggle to find something to eat, let alone fight. Therefore, if this bridge gets destroyed, Konoha should basically announce their complete victory. After Ryo reached the borders, he entered Sage mode and began to look for Kakashi's team. Ryo perceived that Obito's chakra was getting weaker and weaker. He became alarmed and entered the Ice Lightning Chakra mode, rushing towards the trio. After sensing the ice scalpel on Kakashi, he immediately teleported to him. At this time, he couldn't even sense Obito. The rock ninjas were attacking, and a cave before them collapsing on the ground. To ensure the safety of Rin and Kakashi, Ryo bypassed the two men in front of the cave and entered to look for Obito. The smile he saw on the corner of the Earth Ninja's mouth suddenly made Ryo feel horrible. What if he was too conceited and relied too much on the manga? What if the injuries that Obito received got him beyond being saved? The scene before him was like the one in the manga, but the image of Obito's carefree smile was the only thing that was before him, and the scenes of meeting the trio played back in his mind. You could only escape with luck. But how long would that last you? A rock jonin said. No. This kid is not the Uchiha that we just killed. Who are you? Another jonin asked Ryo. Ryo. Obito. Rin's voice had a cry in it, and Kakashi had his head down without saying a word. Seeing the state of his two friends, Ryo became even more emotional, and his Sharingan, which was unwillingly opened, was full with tears. Kakashi, Rin. I'm sorry. It was the first time Ryo felt such grief. Ryo, don't blame yourself. Before passing away, Obito mentioned you, he was thankful for all your help, and happy that he had to have you as his friend. Rin's words made emotions burst with Ryo's heart, and the tomo in his Sharingan kept turning around. I'll kill these three brats, and you go and see if there are other Kono. The rock ninja's words stopped short. The other jonin was in cold sweat, seeing the head of his companion flying high. He realized that dealing with this person in front of him was far beyond his capabilities, and turned around and ran. Ryo wasn't about to chase him, for that jonin was stopped by a figure of someone with lightning chakra covering his fist. Kakashi was finally able to control Chidori after receiving Obito's Sharingan. The jonin didn't even have time to react before the jutsu pierced through his heart. Kakashi was in disbelief of his own capability after killing the jonin. Ryo and Kakashi walked back to Rin. Looking at their grieving friend on her knees, Ryo wanted to comfort her, but was out of words. Rin, are you okay? Rin shook her head and didn't speak. She looked up at Kakashi, then turned to Ryo and was surprised. Ryo. Your eyes. Chapter 165, Mangekyo Sharingan. My eyes. Hearing Rin's words, Ryo also realized the change in his Sharingan. Everything around him became even more clear, even the fluttering of insects' wings. Ryo, is this? Rin only saw the Sharingan before, and did not know of the Mangekyo's existence. The pattern in Ryo's eyes was very different from anything she saw before. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan, the legendary Uchiha Madara had these eyes. Ryo reached for his eyes, and then ridiculed himself. Rin didn't ask. Hearing the name of Madara, she understood what these eyes meant. Ryo closed his Mangekyo. The motive behind this trip of his was to ensure Rin's safety, and nothing else. By this time, Kakashi had collapsed, and Ryo condensed an ice bed and put him upon it, and then took out a scroll. Rin, this is for you. You must save it. Ryo said with serious tone. She didn't ask questions, and took the scroll carefully. After Minato took down many rock ninjas, he used the flying thunder god to teleport to Kakashi. He was surprised to see Ryo, and didn't know when he arrived to the battlefield. Looking at the state of the two before him, Minato realized what was going on. Rin, Obito, Minato's voice was trembling. She did not speak, nor did he. Obito's death was a devastating blow to him. Ryo hated the atmosphere, and turned around to leave. Before going away, he whispered to Rin not to tell anyone about his eyes. He used the ice lightning chakram mode to get all the way to the fire country, and then went to the forest of death with his teleportation barrier. Ryo opened his Mangekyo, condensed an ice mirror and looked at his eyes carefully. Ryo's eyes looked similar to Suzuki's Mangekyo, being a six-pointed star. However, his pattern was much simpler. Besides enhancing the regular Sharingan's abilities, one's Mangekyo ability was mostly about specific skills to him. Ryo's Mangekyo had abilities that he had never seen in the manga. His left eye gave him the ability to enhance the power of ninjutsu, while his right was to sculpt and create a genjutsu world of ice. The ice world was somewhat similar to the Tsukuyomi's world. In this world, everything was dominated by Ryo. While the Tsukuyomi served to take down the enemy by breaking their spirit and inducing mental trauma to them, the ice world directly froze their consciousness. As for his other ability, Ryo tried using it, and its effect was rather unexpected. It was very simple and brute. Ryo tried the ability on his Raise Non, and it became 20% stronger. He then experimented with several other jutsus, and found that this ability increased their power by 20% as well. The more powerful the jutsu is, the more it drained power from the Mangekyo. Ryo was pretty satisfied with his Mangekyo. While its powers were not as absurd as Kota Amatsukami or Kamui, they were good nevertheless. After getting a little familiar with his Mangekyo's powers, Ryo left the Forest of Death. Now, he intended to solve the problem of sight loss as soon as possible. 2 days ago, Ryo and Orochimaru finished working together on discovering the genetic modification necessary to perfectly solve this problem. Ryo wasn't eager to change the arrangement of genetic sequences in his cells. While this was mostly due to the fact that he did not activate the Mangekyo yet, it was also because of the fact that he lacked the chakra, specifically the Senjo's characteristic Yang chakra necessary to achieve the rearrangement. Now that he had activated his Mangekyo, Ryo wasn't going to let himself fall victim to its side effects. Therefore, Ryo was going to seek help from Kushina. In the manga, Kurama was divided in 2 halves by Minato, a yin half and a yang half. The chakra of the yang half in Naruto, paired with his Uzumaki lineage, allowed him to recover quickly from any injuries. Therefore, Ryo speculated that the Kyuubi must be able to grant him strong vitality. Ryo found Kushina at Ichiraku Ramen. After seeing her, he said very seriously, "Ne-san, I have something important I want you to help me with." "What?" asked Kushina after swallowing a chopstick of ramen. "First, come with me. It's not convenient for me to explain here." After Ryo finished his words, he used teleportation barrier to take Kushina along with him home. "My ramen." "Ryo, you better have a good reason to be in such a hurry," Kushina said with anger. "Ne-san, I need Kurama's chakra." "What do you need that for?" Kushina felt it was a strange request. "Because of this." Finishing his words, Ryo opened his Mangekyo. Kurama, who listening to the conversation, also noticed the Mangekyo. "Kushina, switch with me." Seeing the Mangekyo after so many years, Kurama was somewhat agitated. Kushina let him take over, and he looked straight in Ryo's eyes. Seeing of the Mangekyo, Kurama could only think of one person, the one who used these eyes before to control him. After a while, Kurama finally asked, "Kid, what do you want my chakra for?" "Kurama, I want to use the vitality brought by your chakra to complete a technique. Once this technique is completed, using the Mangekyo won't cause me to go blind anymore," Ryo explained briefly. Kurama was shocked to hear Ryo's words, and the expression made by Kushina's body showed his surprise. How could that be possible? Since the dawn of time, only very few people activated the Mangekyo. Apart from the Rikudo Sennin, his son Indra and Uchiha Madara, no one was ever able to solve this problem. Our points of view are different. You've been all confined by the fixed thinking of this world, while I believe in science," Ryo said seriously. "Science? What's that?" Kurama asked aggressively, as he hadn't heard that word before. Science is the term describing humans' attempts of exploring and understanding the laws of the universe. With science, one could reach the heaven above with no chakra. What Kurama was hearing was like nothing he ever heard before, but he could tell that Ryo was far from lying. "All right, I shall lend you my chakra. What should I do?" Kurama wanted to see this magical power that science could grant. "Kurama, you only need extract part of your Yang chakra, and then inject it into my body," Ryo said quickly. "All right, but how long will this take?" It took Ryo a few hours to change the genetic arrangement of the cells of a mouse, and nearly a day to do the same to monkey. Therefore, Ryo estimated that it should take about 2 days for him to achieve the same effects on himself. Kurama nodded, and went to discuss the matter with Kushina. She had been listening to the two's conversation and heard everything, and she agreed very quickly. Chapter 166, A Mangekyo That Never Goes Blind. After Kushina agreed, Ryo began his preparations. Changing the genetic arrangement inside his cells was no joke. It required tremendous amounts of mental power, and he couldn't afford to commit any mistakes during the process. An error in sequencing could have extremely severe consequences. However, Ryo had already changed the structure of his cells forever through ice elementization. That was the change that allowed him to have the ability to make use of the ice element. Therefore, even if any mishap occurred, Ryo could just immediately enter ice elementization to save the situation. It was because of ice elementization that Ryo would go straight into these trials without needing human experimentation. As a person who had studied medicine for many years, that was where Ryo drew the line. When ready, Ryo used an ice scalpel, cutting his finger while out of elementization and releasing a few drops of blood. Then, he released a small amount of natural energy from his yin seal. After Kurama felt that natural energy release, he injected the already prepared yang chakra into Ryo's body. Ryo merged the two into a special chakra, similar to the regular senjutsu chakra. With the help of this chakra, Ryo's attempt to change the genetic arrangement of the cells inside these drops of blood. Everything starts difficult. Ryo's first attempt failed for he had used too much of this chakra. The second time, Ryo reduced the amount of chakra, but the process failed due to the lack of chakra. After over a dozen failures in succession, Ryo finally found the right balance, and the transformation of the first cell was finally completed. This cell was more active than the other cells, but not aggressive toward them. It kept moving around his blood. In just a few minutes, the other cells in the drops of blood slowly changed due to the influence of this modified cells. It was like a bunch of co-workers, seeing their colleague being praised by the boss for doing something, and paying attention to that and starting to imitate it. The first to imitate would be also rewarded, and the rest would get jealous and follow their lead as well. Cells were like that, the closest cell to the initial one changed followed by those next to them and so on. In the matter of a few minutes, the drops of blood began to radiate extraordinary vitality. Hey, this feeling is familiar. It's like the vitality that we the Uzumaki have. But this is clearly Ryo's blood. Kushina said in surprise. Seeing the change in the blood, Kurama understood Ryo's idea, but he still didn't understand how he actually did it. Is this science? Feeling the great vitality in the blood, Ryo couldn't help but smile, but his expression turned serious again very quickly. What he did just now was determining the amount of chakra needed to modify a single cell outside of his body. Now, the real deal begins. Ryo released much greater amounts of natural energy from his yin seal, and it flew into his body far more than before. Kurama also injected far more yang chakra within Ryo's body. Ryo as before merged the two energies into this new special chakra, and then began to change the genetic arrangement of cells in the vicinity of his heart. The heart provides pressure for blood flow, to get blood to all parts of his body. By changing the genetic arrangement of cells in the vicinity of his heart, he could fill the body with new cells as quickly as possible. Basing off of the previous success he had, Ryo completed the transformation of the first cell in his body, and modified cells began to flow in his body with blood. After that, he modified the second, and the third. Ryo kept carrying out these cell transformations for over 30 hours. Doing so for so long, even Ryo's huge spiritual power was beginning to be overwhelmed. From the outside, Kurama who had been observing Ryo found that his body had changed completely overnight. He felt that his body was exuding amazing vitality, similar to that of Kushina, and it grew more and more with the passage of time. By the morning, Ryo's vitality was equal to Kushina. The growth of vitality in Ryo's body suddenly stopped, and his eyes that had been closed for over 30 hours were also opened. Kurama saw that Ryo's Mangekyo returned to its simple three-tomo state, rotated wildly and then changed back to its Mangekyo pattern. Ryo's Mangekyo didn't change in appearance, but Kurama felt far greater threat being emitted from them. Before, Ryo said to Kurama that a Mangekyo Sharinan shouldn't be able to control him. However, an eternal Mangekyo Sharinan should be able to do so. Ryo didn't have the eternal Mangekyo Sharinan, but Kurama was still feeling threat from Ryo's eyes. "Kid, have you succeeded?" asked Kurama. Well, feeling the vitality in his body, and the constant flow of vitality into his Mangekyo, Ryo knew he did succeed. "Kurama, Ne-san, thank you so much for your help." Ryo expressed his sincere gratitude. "I just wanted to see if the science you were talking about is that amazing. I wasn't trying to help you." Kurama again exposed the big arrogant fox that he was. Afterwards, Kurama returned Kushina's body to her, and went back to sleep. The first thing Kushina felt was great hunger. She barely uttered two sentences to Ryo before quickly rushing out of his place and going to Ichiraku. Ryo used the teleportation barrier and went to the battlefield of the Wave Country, and then condensed a Raisin Shuriken that he enhanced with his left eye and threw it away. The Mangekyo enhanced Raisin Shuriken broke out with amazing destructive power. Ryo's use of such a strong technique consumed a great part of his left eye's force, but the vitality within his body immediately transformed into new power to replenish that of his Mangekyo. With this new genetic arrangement, Ryo had no reason to fear blindness. Ryo wasn't happy for long, for his body emitted an urgent message to him, hungry. Time to eat. After eating nothing for over 30 hours, Ryo thought it was normal for him to be hungry now. So he quickly teleported back to Konoha and then rushed straight to Ichiraku Ramen. When he reached it, he found Kushina already there. Hello Ryo. What are you going to eat today? Boss Toki welcomed Ryo with enthusiasm. Uncle, give me a bowl of ramen, any type. Now, every cell in Ryo's body required him to eat quickly, who couldn't even think of choosing what to eat. Toki was very quick at serving Ryo. In no time, a large bowl of seafood ramen was placed in front of him. No matter how hot it was, Ryo couldn't care. He took the bowl and immediately started eating, asking Toki for another one. Toki did so, and Ryo finished over 10 bowls of ramen before his hunger finally faded. Kushina, who had finished just 2 bowls, could even eat more, for she was looking at Ryo in awe. Usually, Ryo doesn't eat that much. What happened today? Chapter 167, Kakashi's Sharinon. Kurama. What's wrong? Did his operation fail? Kushina was worried about Ryo, who had been acting so unusually, as asked Kurama about it. Haha. Kushina, don't worry, that kid fine. Hearing Kurama's answer, Kushina immediately was much more at ease. This kid should remain in this state for several days. I don't know how he made his cells so full of vitality, but I know that my chakra was part of that. To maintain this state, he needs to replenish his energy from the outside world. How would he sustain this style of eating from now on? I can't even help him much with buying ramen. Kushina reached for wallet and felt a little distressed. No, don't worry. After he gets enough energy, he won't need to eat so much. Think about yourself, you also have so much vitality. Do you need to eat so much? That's good. Kushina sighed with relief. Just like Kurama mentioned, Ryo kept these eating habits for the following 2 days. After 2 days of mat eating, Ryo took a lot of energy from the food and his body began to stabilize. On the 3rd day, his food intake was restored to a normal rate. Still, he was eating so much more than he used to. 2 days later, Ryo's body became gradually accustomed to its cellular modifications. The enormous vitality within his cells began to stimulate his body in other ways. The most obvious change was the amounts of chakra within his body. Ryo could clearly sense that it had increased by a bit. This was an unexpected harvest for Ryo. However, this growth in chakra was rather inevitable. After all, chakra is merging of physical energy that harvested from the trillions of cells that one has in his body, and the spiritual energy that's derived from the mind's consciousness. Ryo did not have any genetic rearrangement that's related to chakra, but a cell that's fuller of vitality could exert more physical energy than an ordinary cell. Moreover, Ryo also enhanced mental strength by the opening of his Manjikyo. These 2 factors together led to the increase in his chakra stores. Ryo thought that if his chakra was to keep increasing at such a pace, he would reach Kage tier without the Ice Lightning Chakra mode or Sage mode. But after a few days, his chakra stores stopped growing, making him feel a little down. Over the next following days, Ryo was mainly molding chakra and practicing, not giving any attention to the outside world. That was at least until Kajin flew in hurriedly. Ryo, why are you still here? Ne-san and everyone went to the gate of the village. Hurry up! Kajin said while flying over Ryo's shoulders. Ryo hadn't been out, but from Kajin's words he was able to guess what was going on. The heroes from the Battle of Konoha Bridge are coming back. Just thinking of the battle made Ryo feel smothered. All he could think about was the life and death of Obito. His thoughts went into chaos, and he had to take a deep breath to calm himself down, and then used ice elementization and teleported to Kushina. At the time, Kushina was along with Shisui standing in the crowds at the edge of the village. Because Shisui was the genius of the Uchiha, there were members of the police force around them, and they got to be at a high spot due to that. After Ryo appeared, he didn't chat with the two much. He just said hello and stood beside them. Kushina and Shisui looked at each other, both sensing that there was something wrong with Ryo. Kushina nodded to Shisui, trying to get him to ask Ryo about what's wrong. But since he felt that his sensei wasn't having a good mood, Shisui didn't want to bother him. However, Kushina was persistent, and started looking angry. Shisui could only helplessly ask, "Sensei, what's wrong?" Ryo shook his head and did not speak. He was now confused and disturbed and did not want to answer. After a while, Konoha's sensor ninjas announced detecting Konoha's victorious troops not too far away. Konoha's victory this time almost had no casualties after the destruction of Konoha Bridge. With no resources and with Minato around, the Rock were not able to fight back. Onaki's desperate tactics all paled in face of Konoha's yellow flash, and the thousands of ninjas he had on the borders quickly collapsed. As the ninjas were getting closer to Konoha's gates, the villagers began to cheer. Their cheers were getting louder and louder, and everyone was screaming the name of Minato Namikaze. Minato reluctantly forced out a smile to boost the morale of the people cheering around him. After seeing that smile, the villagers went louder. But Kushina, whose soul was linked to that of Minato, knew that her boyfriend was forcing his smile. In fact, Ryo and Minato's mood was far worse than she imagined. Minato, like Ryo, was blaming himself for failing to save his apprentice. He had the Flying Thunder God, he could get to Kakashi in the blink of an eye, but he missed the window to save his disciples as he spent too much time fighting on the battlefield before deciding to check on them. His guilt only went deeper every time he looked at Kakashi and Rin, especially Kakashi, who was falling into self-blame as well. When Kushina saw that there were only 2 people in Kakashi's team, she understood why Ryo and Minato were so abnormal. Looking back at Minato, she was very distressed. And then she saw the expression on Kakashi, whose soul was crushed and could only sigh helplessly. Kakashi was looking down, following Minato into Konoha. As a member of the police force saw Kakashi's left eye, his face changed heavily. He unconsciously wanted to intercept Kakashi and question him, but he was stopped by his colleague. Do not act rashly. That's Kakashi Hatake, White Fang's son and Minato-san's disciple. We'll report this Sharingan issue to Great Elder and he'll handle it. Soon, every last one of Konoha's ninjas entered the village, and the civilians who were welcoming them scattered, while the police force went to Kataki Uchiha. On the other hand, Kakashi returned home, and Sakumo was shocked at seeing his son's eye. Kakashi, what's this Sharingan? Sakumo asked quickly. The Katake clan wasn't a ninjutsu-focused one. They relied on Kenjutsu, Taijutsu with lightning chakra mode boosting that in their fighting style. Sakumo could sense that the Sharingan kept consuming Kakashi's chakra. For him, a Sharingan will only be drag, keeping him from hitting his full potential. Therefore, Sakumo was so anxious when he asked the question. Hearing his father, Kakashi unconsciously reached for his left eye, and then bitterly said, "It's Obito's." "Obito, your teammate. To save me, half of his body was crushed with a boulder. He gave me his Sharingan before he died." Kakashi's voice began to tremble. After listening to Kakashi, Sakumo immediately decided to make his son keep this eye. Obito was Kakashi's savior, and this was his last memento. Sakumo wasn't going to let anyone take that away from his son. "Kakashi, go to your room and rest for now. I'll handle the matter of your Sharingan." Chapter 168, Yellow Flash and White Fang. Sakumo seemed to be so cold and serious, but he was so emotional hearing what was going on. After all, he as well was the type to attach great importance to his companions, as shown in his abandoning of his mission years ago. Kakashi's Sharingan was a memento from Obito, who wasn't just his savior, but his teammate and friend for so many years. The only thing that made Sakumo want to abandon this Sharingan was his fear for his son's future. The burden of wielding a Sharingan without being from the Uchiha's bloodline is too great. Originally, Kakashi inherited the sturdy body and great traits of the Hatake clan. He had potential to exceed the all, but now this is uncertain because of the Sharingan. However, this was not the most important thing for the time being. What seemed more problematic to Sakumo was finding a way to get his son to keep his friend's memento. Any family with a Kekii Genkai would not want that to get out of the clan. The Uchiha were no different. They should certainly have objections to Kakashi having the Sharingan. Besides, the Uchiha clan is one of the 2 largest founding clans of the village. Although the Katake clan's status had risen with Sakumo's presence as one of the village's strongest, it was in no way comparable to that of the Uchiha. Although he was a Kage tier, facing the Uchiha he was probably doomed to lose. This caused him a headache. Offending the Uchiha could end up hurting the village, but he had to do so for his son's sake. Thinking about that, opened his eyes, and was resolved. He carried his blade and went alone to the Uchiha clan. Coincidentally, as soon as he left home, he met Ryo and Minato. The two met on their way to Sakumo's place. Both were feeling horribly guilty about Kakashi's state. When seeing how down he was entering the village, the two came. "Sakumo-san, you're not planning on going to the Uchihas alone, are you?" Ryo saw Sakumo's chakra blade and guessed his plan. "Sakumo-san, let's wait and then go together, Ryo should see Kakashi's Sharingan." Minato quickly added. "See the Sharingan? Ryo, do you have a way to remove the risks of the Sharingan on Kakashi's future?" Ryo scratched his head. In fact, he could not make any guarantee. However, in order to temporarily appease Sakumo's emotions, he nodded. Sakumo felt a lot more at ease. Nothing was more important to him than Kakashi's future. He did miss the idea of going to the Uchiha district and took the two into Kakashi's room. Knock knock. Ryo knocked on the door. No one answered. This lasted a lot, and Sakumo got a bit impatient, directly opening the door and leading Ryo and Minato in. In the room, Kakashi was staring at the ceiling with a dull look. Seeing him, Minato and Ryo felt even more guilt. Ryo entered ice elementization just to calm himself down, and then walked over to Kakashi. Kakashi's Sharingan was transplanted by Rin, just like what happened in the manga. However, Rin's medical expertise this time around was far superior. From a surgical point of view, Rin did a perfect job. Ryo wouldn't have done any better himself. Such a perfect operation should have been impossible for Rin to perform without the experience she had with Ryo's medical team. The Sharingan was consuming Kakashi's chakra, while releasing its own into his body seamlessly. However, Kakashi was not an Uchiha. In the manga, he did not have perfect control over his Sharingan, so it kept draining him. Therefore, the adult Kakashi was plagued by having low chakra reserves, which hindered him in battle and made him fatigue rather quickly. Facing strong enemies, he could only rely on his massive fighting talent and using the many techniques in his arsenal to take them down. Ryo had two solutions to help Kakashi reach his full potential. One was sealing the Sharingan, something that Ryo knew Kakashi would never agree on. The second was to make Kakashi's body adapt faster to his Sharingan. Ryo was seeing that the Sharingan was converting Kakashi's chakra into its own that it released in his body. This was changing it more suitable to hold it. However, this process was painfully slow. If it wasn't for Rin's perfect surgery, it wouldn't have happened at all. Ryo estimated that this assimilation should take over 10 years to be achieved. That was too long. These 10 years are supposed to be the ones when Kakashi grows the most. However, if nothing is done, his chakra's increase will stagnate and he would evolve at the same pace he did in the manga. Therefore, Ryo decided to find ways to speed up the assimilation of the Sharingan. While Ryo was thinking about Kakashi's matter, Minato and Sakumo were discussing the matter of the Sharingan. The two were in disapproval about the way that they should use to deal with the problem, but both agreed in not being willing to return the Sharingan to the Uchiha clan. For Minato, Kakashi was the only one entitled to decide on the matter. This was Obito's last wish, and that's something that Minato wasn't going to let anyone interfere with. His plan was to notify the third about the situation, and let him negotiate with Kataki. Sakumo had been disappointed before by the 3RD's lenient behavior. His plan was to just go and talk to the clan on his own. The two finally agreed. First, use force to make the Uchiha clan realize who puts the terms, and then negotiate. Upon deciding that, the two immediately set off to the Uchiha's district. Konoha's White Fang and Yellow Flash, both being the village's strongest heroes of the Second and Third World War respectively, walked together side by side. One had his white light chakra saber, the other had his flying thunder god Kunao in hand. Facing both should be something out of the Uchiha's nightmares. After the two arrived at the district, the guard very decisively refused their request to meet Kataki. Seeing this, the two did not hesitate, and started immediately. Kataki had already guessed that Sakumo was coming, and he was well prepared. The Third World War had just practically ended, and most of the Uchiha's elites returned to the district. Now, over a dozen quasi-cage tier jonins were around, all with 3 Tomo Sharingan. With such a lineup, Kataki was confident in victory over Sakumo. Little did he know that Sakumo didn't come alone, he had Minato alongside him as he entered the village. The single and 2 Tomo Sharingan wielding ninjas did not even see anything but a golden flash before losing consciousness. The district was turning into what seemed like a deserted land, and Minato and Sakumo soon reached Kataki. "You're such a big shot, Kataki Dano," it wasn't easy to see you today. Minato showed a brilliant smile. Seeing that smile, Kataki, who had been fighting alongside Minato for many years, froze in place in cold sweat. It very clear to him how powerful Minato was. Sakumo did not say a word, just standing with his chakra saber exuding white light, and making Kataki feel great pressure. The Uchiha clan head did not know what hit him. He was thinking that it just a matter of waiting for Sakumo to fall into his trap. He did not expect to be in such a situation. Chapter 169, Fugaku's Plan. The situation left Kataki in a dilemma. At this time, while it was possible for the Uchihas to take on Sakumo on his own, facing him with Minato, was a whole different deal. Facing these two, it was clear that they have no chance of winning. Fugaku, what do you think? Kataki looked back at Fugaku, who had just taken over as the clan's head. Their purpose is to let Kakashi keep the Sharingan he has. We can try to negotiate with them. Fugaku said after thinking quickly. Negotiate? About what? Could we just let a foreigner have the Sharingan? Kataki was a little agitated. Ryo Yamanaka is also a stranger, and he wields the Sharingan. Kakashi having another single eye won't matter much. They seem very interested in letting Kakashi keep the Sharingan, so trying to get some interests of our clan in exchange doesn't seem like a bad idea. Hearing Fugaku's suggestion, Kataki wrinkled his forehead and looked at the new clan head in shock. All his life, Kataki had been very proud. To him, the Uchiha's glory is above all. He would have never exchanged the Sharingan for anything. Fugaku already knew well of Kataki's stubbornness, and that the old man would never agree with him. Since you Kataki Dano won't agree, we have only one other way. Just try to hold these two off until I bring the third Hokage to be a medium. Well, that's the only way. Fugaku, you're the clan's head. Go ahead and bring the Hokage, and please leave this matter to me. Fugaku left, and Kataki led the elite troop he had gathered in advance. Minato noticed Fugaku's departure and did not try to stop him. He already knew what he was going to do, and Minato himself was hoping for the third to come. The Uchiha's elite team was entirely composed of elite Jonins and Quasi-Kage tier ninjas who have the 3 Tomo Sharingan. With their dojutsu, they could barely capture Minato's movement, but that helped them prevent themselves from being taken down in an instant. On the other side, they weren't fighting Sakumo hard, as they were only trying to waste time. After around 10 minutes, Fugaku came along with the third, and both sides stopped engaging each other when seeing him. The third was somewhat dissatisfied with Sakumo and Minato's behavior. The two broke into the Uchiha's district, provoking them and engaging them in combat. This was no trivial matter. Faced with the 3 RDS gaze, Minato smirked and scratched his head, while Sakumo kept his white fangs expressionless face. The third felt that he was beating a dead horse. These two knew him too well, they knew that he will not be really angry. Hokage-sama, Minato and Sakumo broke into our district by force today. I hope that you would give us an account on this matter. Kataki directly said to the third. Oh, Chief Fugaku, Kataki Dano, rest assured. I'll make sure that you all reach a consensus. The third smiled at Kataki. The 3 RDS answer made Minato smile. He called Fugaku chief, and then turned to Kataki. It seemed like he and Fugaku had already reached some sort of an agreement. After the negotiations started, from Fugaku's attitude, Minato further confirmed his first assessment. It was because while Kataki was asking Sakumo to return the eye, Fugaku was turning a deaf ear to this and looking every now and again at the 3 RDS eyes. Everyone present was aware of what was happening between the two, and Kataki soon realized that he might have fallen into Fugaku's trap by letting him be the one to bring over the third. Sure enough, after the conversation started, the third practically bypassed Kataki, talking mainly to Fugaku to find out what the Hatake clan should have to pay in order to let Kakashi keep the Sharingan. At first, Kataki and the rest of the clan's elders collectively opposed the matter. But when they heard Sakumo say that he was willing to offer a quarter of the Hatake clan's property, they all went silent. The Hatake clan had been growing at the hands of Sakumo. It was turning stronger and wealthier over the years. While it wasn't comparable to the Uchiha, it still became comparable to the Nara and Sarutobi clans. Hearing Sakumo offering quarter of his clan's property for a single Sharingan, all of the Uchiha present accepted the offer with the exception of Kataki. I will not agree. How can the blood of the Uchiha clan be measured by money? Kataki was furious. What he wasn't noticing, was the eyes of his fellow clansmen as he said those words. Just like birds give their lives for food, men would do the same for wealth. Ninjas are human after all, and they all felt that Kataki's refusal was costing them a great opportunity. That's true. We are adding a request. Let Hokage become one of the 3 RDS Umbu, until the Sharingan is of less proportion on his overall power. Fugaku quickly added a condition. You must not be stubborn Kataki Dano. Another elder of the Uchiha feared that Kataki would once again interfere, and quickly tried to keep him from doing so. Kataki's heart was bleeding, but he did not speak out. Fugaku's suggestion went against any argument that he was going to make. After Fugaku succeeded as the Uchiha's clan head, Fugaku wasn't leaving him full control over the clan. It was the other way around, with him monopolizing power. Fugaku was being treated like a young prince, with Kataki being his minister who pulls all the strings. Fugaku definitely didn't want this situation to go on, as he could only be truly the clan's head if he could have complete control over it. However, Kataki had been the clan's head for years, managing its interests, and his prestige was far above his successor. Helpless, Fugaku would only lurk down and wait for an opportunity to seize control. Said opportunity came to his lap when he heard of Kakashi getting the Sharingan. Kataki was a brutal man who was strict to tradition. Fugaku managed to use that to make him fall into his own trap. That way, he successfully weakened his prestige among the Uchiha clan. In the end, the two sides reached a preliminary consensus with the third being the medium. The Hatake clan would pay a quarter of their property and the price of getting Kakashi into the Umbu in exchange for the Uchiha's guarantee that they would not raise questions any more about Kakashi's eyes. A few days later, the Hatake sent the Uchiha a large amount of silver. The Uchiha received the money which benefited all of its members. Everyone but Kataki was very satisfied. The negotiations also allowed Fugaku to gain supporters in the clan, rising to the status of being a true clan head. In a hole 1,000 miles away, a prestigious old man was talking to teenagers whose half was wrapped, with several white figures popping around him from time to time. The young man was Obito, who just like in the manga, did not die, and was instead saved by Madara. However, his injuries this time around were even more serious. He only woke up on this day, with the first thing to have in sight being Madara's face. Chapter 170, Ghost of the Uchiha, Uchiha Madara. Wait. You're really Uchiha Madara? No one could tell how many times Obito had said those words already. The old man on the stone chair didn't pay attention to his question, as if he could not hear his voice. Obito was the playful fun-loving type. In the manga, when he impersonated Madara, he was very serious. But whenever he acted like Toby, he let some glimpses of that nature of his be exposed. Obito at this point in time did not go yet through all of the experiences that the old him had in the manga, he wasn't mature enough. Ever since he woke up, he never even stopped speaking. Obito, I said you shouldn't disturb Madara-sama. White Zetsu popped out of the ground. But I really want to know if he's Uchiha Madara. Of course he's Madara-sama. Zetsu was getting a bit helpless. But didn't Uchiha Madara lose to the first Hokage in the Battle of the Valley of the End, and then die? That's just what the world had seen. On the stone chair, Madara, whose eyes were closed for a long time, finally answered Obito's question. Madara-sama. It doesn't matter. He wants to know, I will tell him what happened. Madara said faintly. His tone was very dull, and there was no emotion in his voice, as if he was telling the story of someone else. Much of the Uchiha's history in Konoha was hidden by the clan's elders from their younger generations. Obito was hearing about the Warring States period for the first time. As Obito was listening to Madara's emotionless storytelling, an image of that period appeared before his eyes. In the center of that image were two teenagers, who had great friendship while growing up, and dreamt together of founding a great village where every child could live long and have a prosperous life. Their dream seemed to be out of reach, yet so vivid. But fate made them stand on opposite sides, because of their clans. The two rose in the war, crushing their peers and surpassing the older generation. After the deaths of Tajima, Madara's father, and Butsuma, Hashirama's father, the two teenagers and their younger brothers became the leaders of their clans. At the same time, both acquired new powers, being the Mangekyo Sharingan and Wood Release, respectively. This was the first time Obito had ever heard of the Mangekyo. He had always thought that the peak of a Sharingan's evolution is becoming a 3-tomo Sharingan. The battle between the two continues for long years, and the Uchiha were getting gradually overwhelmed. Even Madara's younger brother, Izuna, died at the hands of Tobirama Senju. Madara skipped the matter of the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan directly to mentioning the last battle before Konoha's establishment. Obito's eyes shined as he was listening to Madara. He could not imagine people so powerful. The scenes described by Madara made his blood boil of excitement. In the end, the Uchiha clan still got defeated. But it was Hashirama's willingness to exchange his life for peace that finally convinced Madara. In this way, the Uchiha and the Senju formed an alliance, and the strongest families in the world united to form a village. This force was enough to sweep away all obstacles standing in the way of peace. In particular, Hashirama and Madara's power exceeded everyone's imagination. Other than each other, the two could have no rivals, and soon, their names echoed all over the world. God of Shinobi, Hashirama Senju. Ghost of the Uchiha, Uchiha Madara. With the power of these two, Konoha was founded in the most prosperous land, the Fire Country. Everything went beautifully, and the village kept on thriving. For the sake of peace, Hashirama captured the Biju and intended on distributing them to the villages. At that time, Madara was finding out the shortcomings of his childhood dreams, and he read the stone tablet left by the Rikudo Sennin. Considering what he read to be the real path to peace, he decided to leave Konoha. The real path to peace? What is that? Obito asked with curiosity. When you acquire the Mangekyo Sharingan, go to the underground bunker of the Naka Shrine to find out the answer. I can get the Mangekyo Sharingan? Obito asked with some excitement. Obito, you've directly opened the two-tomo Sharingan. You are a genius. You must be able to get the Mangekyo. Zetsu on the side gave Obito the thumbs up. For the first time, Obito was described by the term genius, and that made feel quite awkward. Madara did not care about Obito's last question, and continued talking about the Battle of the Valley of the End. It went exactly like what was already known to the rest of the village. However, its outcome was different. What everyone in the village believed was that Madara lost to Hashirama, eventually dying at his hands. But in fact, Madara survived, after successfully obtaining Hashirama's flesh. How could you manage to deceive the first Hokage-sama? And what did you want with his cells? The Uchiha's Sharingan has two forbidden jutsus. One is Izanagi, and the other is Izanami. I programmed my Izanagi to activate in my right eye. Izanagi? What's that? Obito sounded doubtful, he never heard of this jutsu. Izanagi can convert all unfavorable factors, including death, into a dream. However, once used, it makes its user lose sight in the eye he used. Zetsu whispered and explained. And why did you want the first Hokage-sama's cells? To achieve true peace. After finishing those words, Madara closed his eyes and ignored Obito again. After listening to Madara's story, Obito went into a rare silence. What he heard today took him by surprise. He kept thinking about what Madara mentioned, what is true peace. In the Earth Country not too far away from him, Onaki and the Earth Country's daimyo were having a discussion. The relationship between the Earth Country and its hidden village is usually very good. The daimyo had been unconditionally supporting the rock's development and never interfered with the village's actions. Today, he uncharacteristically came to talk to Onaki. The village had been having several defeats in succession, and suffering heavy losses. They even lost the Yanbai Jinchuriki, twice. In order to support the village's war, the Earth Country had also spent huge sums of money, which led the country into an economic crisis. Anyway, the daimyo looked at the matter, he felt that this war could not go on. Onaki is a very stubborn person, who's never willing to admit defeat. He wasn't accepting that this would end with defeat to Konoha. For this reason, the daimyo himself came to put pressure upon him, and make him recognize his situation. Alright. I understand daimyo-sama. I will send people to Konoha for negotiations. This time, we have lost indeed. Onaki sighed helplessly, admitting the fact of defeat. The daimyo comforted Onaki, and then left. Onaki then called Kitsuke, and explained everything to him. Chapter 171, Building a Mini Juubi. A few days later, Kitsuke entered Konoha with a few rock ninjas, and the third appointed Orochimaru to be responsible for negotiations. Orochimaru could only put his experiments on hold in order to deal with Kitsuke and his lot. The negotiations proceeded very smoothly. The rock were in no position to bargain, while Konoha's condition were not excessive. The two sides quickly reached a consensus. After signing this truce with the Rock, the Third World War had officially ended for Konoha. Just like the previous two, this war also ended with Konoha's victory. Konoha first signed a peace treaty with the Cloud Village, then defeated the Sand Rock Alliance in the Battle of Kikyo Pass, forcing the Sand to surrender, and the Battle of Konobe Bridge was the final nail in the coffin of the Rock's dream of a victory. On the day the two sides signed the peace treaty, the third couldn't wait to announce to Konoha that the war is finally over. No matter what, war always brings pain. Between years 39 and 47, countless Konoha ninjas died on the battlefield, and as many previously happy families mourned their deaths. Today was the day the war was finally over. Konoha's citizens, both ninjas and civilians, were all happy, with many of them shedding tears of joy. Even Sakumo, who was worried sick about Kakashi's situation, smiled after getting the news. A few days ago, Ryo suggested to him that Kakashi should be brought to Orochimaru's lab for treatment. Having absolute trust in Ryo's medical ninjutsu, Sakumo agreed without hesitation. The reason why Ryo wanted to bring Kakashi to Orochimaru's lab was that he wanted to accelerate the assimilation of the Sharingan in Kakashi's body. The Sharingan itself was releasing a special chakra, making Kakashi's body suitable for its use. But this assimilation was going to take far too much time. As estimated by Ryo, it should take at least 10 more years. With Kakashi's current age, these years should be the ones when his strength peaks. Of this important growth of delayed, Kakashi would not surpass the level that he had reached in the manga. Ryo did not want this to happen, so he could only try helping Kakashi with speeding up the process. The best method would be stimulating the Sharingan with external factors, and the best method to choose for such stimulation is of course the use of Hashirama's cells. Therefore, Ryo brought Kakashi back to Orochimaru's lab. It was better if as few people as possible knew about the matter of Hashirama's cells. Most people in Konoha respected the first far too much to accept such use of his cells. The cells used by Ryo were the ones weakened by Madara, as they were less phagocytic. Kakashi had no idea what Ryo was giving him each day, but he could clearly feel that this pale green liquid that circulated in his body was emitting such amazing chakra. While the Senju and the Uchiha share common roots, they were mutually exclusive. The Senju's power was one that suppressed that of the Uchiha, and that was the basis of Ryo's method. As the cells entered Kakashi's body, their chakra naturally approached the Sharingan, making it threatened. The eye would in return resort to Kakashi's body to counter this threat. In this way, and under the effect of such a good conflict, Kakashi and the Sharingan got more and more integrated, and the eye used less and less of Kakashi's chakra. In reality, Ryo did not expect that the assimilation rate of Kakashi would be accelerated by this much even with these weakened cells. In just a few days, Kakashi's left eye's optic nerves were filled with the Sharingan's special chakra. Later, Ryo asked Kakashi to try to control the activation of the Sharingan. After several attempts, Kakashi successfully deactivated the Sharingan. The scarlet two-tomo pupils disappeared, and Kakashi's chakra was no longer being consumed. Kakashi fed the Sharingan with chakra again, and his Sharingan was reactivated, while consuming far less chakra than before. Not only that, Kakashi could also sense that some cells of his body would automatically release specially chakra full of vitality whenever he activated the Sharingan. With it, whatever chakra he lost through the use of the Sharingan, he restored quickly. Ryo's treatment was a complete success. After dealing with the risks brought by Kakashi's new Sharingan, Ryo quickly turned his attention to another plan he had been preparing for a long time. It was building a mini Juubi with the Biju chakra and then part he had of the Gadumazo. Ryo had been thinking for such a long time of this plan. Now, he had the Ichibai's, Sanbai's, Yanbai's, Gobi's, and Kyubi's chakra at hand. And before leaving Madara's cave, he managed to get the Gadumazo's arm. Ryo was intending to use part of the Gadumazo, which was in fact the Juubi's body, to build himself a mini Juubi. Ryo moved to the Forest of Death and found himself a cave in there. He set a barrier at the entrance to prevent the entry of any patrol ninjas or animals. Then, he immediately took out the Gadumazo's arm from its scroll along with the scrolls containing the sealed Ichibai tail. Then, Ryo proceeded to slowly injecting the chakra into the arm. After the arm sensed Biju chakra, it suddenly pulled it in a flash, the Ichibai's tail disappeared. Ryo then opened the Sanbai's chakra scroll, and the Gadumazo's arm also absorbed all that chakra. Same was true for all of the other Biju chakra he had sealed. After absorbing the Kyuubi's chakra, the arm's appearance changed. The arm, initially twice as long as Ryo, turned into a sphere shorter than him. Ryo activated his Sharingan observing the sphere, and was startled by what he found out. He could sense hints of consciousness developing within the sphere. Ryo didn't want to let the Kyuubi's soul to be reborn, but now he had no way to stop the process. Suddenly, he remembered the Sanbai's soul he had sealed. Ryo quickly unwrapped the seal and injected the Sanbai's soul into the sphere. Within 10 minutes, the sphere changed again, and natural energy began rushing into it, with its appearance gradually changing into that of the Sanbai. Seeing that, Ryo had a sigh of relief. It seemed to him that the Sanbai's soul succeeded in preventing the sphere from giving birth to its own consciousness. After a long time, a Sanbai that was slightly taller than Ryo appeared in front of him. At this time, the beast's consciousness was not fully awakened, but its body uncontrollably and involuntarily absorbed natural energy from the outside world. Ryo was intrigued as he looked at the beast in front of him, wanting to see what changes it would receive next. As time went by, a whole day passed, and the beast had already absorbed 1/3 of the original Sanbai's size after consuming days' worth of chakra. By then the cave barely accommodated him. At this time, its consciousness finally awakened, and Ryo felt the spirit of the immense creature before him and prepared himself for combat. After all, last time he faced the Sanbai, things didn't go too well. It was very likely that the Biju would immediately fight him. But what happened wasn't anything that Ryo ever imagined. The beast's consciousness contacted his own, and its shape changed again, becoming more and more similar to that of an animal that Ryo remembered well. And from the beast consciousness, he clearly received a message: "Are you my master?" Chapter 172, New Life. The Sanbai's look was getting closer and closer to that of a ragdoll cat that Ryo had raised in his previous life, just many times larger than that. Looking at the immense cat before him, emotions surged within Ryo's heart. What about the Kyuubi, or the Sanbai? What is this? A ghost from the past. Ryo took a deep breath, made himself calm down and then said to the ragdoll cat, "So, aren't you a turtle? How come your species changed? I saw this creature in my master's memory. Master still liked it very much, so I changed." The ragdoll cat's voice had a hint of grief in it. "My memory? How do you see my memory?" The cat did not answer. Looking at its tangled expression, Ryo guessed that it didn't know either. "You don't know either, don't you? Let's change the question. Is your soul that of the Sanbai?" "The Sanbai? That big turtle? Isn't that the food that master gave me?" The cat licked its lips. It must be that the Sanbai's soul was pretty delicious. Ryo realized that it was the mini Kyuubi's soul that actually swallowed that of the Sanbai. No wonder this new creature wasn't hostile towards him. This was rather strange, a soul newly born into this world swallowing up that of the Sanbai. It seemed just as absurd as seeing a baby beating up a grown man. Ryo didn't get much time to think about that. The ragdoll cat's voice was ringing in his head, "Master! Don't you like me? Now, you can change me into whatever you want, but I won't be able to change once my body and soul fully merge." Ryo thought the matter over and decided to change the beast's shape. After all, a ragdoll cat wasn't the most fitting creature to fight in the Naruto world. "What do you want me to look like, master?" "Anything is okay." Ryo asked with some curiosity. "Yes, but you'll have to be fast, master, my soul's about to fully merge with my body," the cat urged. Ryo thought of the image of the Oriental dragon in his mind, and then passed it over to the mind of the puppet cat. Being originally Chinese, he was deeply attached to that image. "No, I don't want to be a mollusk." The cat refused directly. The corner of Ryo's mouth twitched. "That's a dragon. Not a freaking mollusk." The cat was unwilling to become a dragon, so he could only keep thinking about other creatures from Chinese mythology. However, they were all rejected by the cat, one after the other. In the end, Ryo simply gave up, and let her decide what she wanted to be. In the end, the image chosen by the cat surprised Ryo. It had a lion's head, antlers, lavender eyes, a moose's body, blue water skin covered with dragon scales, and a purple gold dragon tail. She looked like a water Kirin. "Master, does this look good?" The voice of what had just been a cat rang within Ryo's mind. A water Kirin, could that ever be bad? Where did you see this image? Ryo did not think of Kirin, let alone a water Kirin. I saw Master's ninjutsu, Raiden, Kirin. I think it looks good. As for the color of my body, it seems to come with the ability of the turtle. He can control water, and I ate him, so I can control water as well. As it was speaking, a massive mass of water appeared around the water Kirin. Ryo looked at its appearance with attention, and then found that it didn't look exactly like the legendary Kirin he had in mind. Normally, a Kirin would have an ox tail, but this had a dragon's tail. Also, this beast should be a Biju, but it only had one tail. This made Ryo speculate that it was no stronger than the Ichibai. However, he quickly omitted this theory. This water Kirin had great amounts of chakra, far surpassing the Ichibai. It also had natural energy, making his chakra akin to the Senjutsu chakra. On top that, it controlled water. The Yonbai, let alone the Ichibai, might not be able to take on the water Kirin. Master, I still have no name. Give me a name. Again, the water Kirin's voice interrupted Ryo's thoughts. Naming was never Ryo's forte. He generally liked using colors to name. The water Kirin's color was blue. For now, I'll call you Korin. I'm not good at picking up name. Have your sweet time choosing a better one in the future. Note, Korin has the same ko from Kajin, meaning small. Rin means female Kirin. Korin breathed a sigh of relief after hearing her name wasn't going to mean little blue. They were both connected, so it was clear to her what Ryo was thinking about. By the way, Korin, are you still a Biju? Korin nodded, and then shook her head. She nodded because her chakra source is the same as that of the Biju, and shook her head as she was different life form. The 9 Biju were the result of the splitting of the Juobi by the Rikudo Sennin, with their souls also endowed by him. Korin had some kind of consciousness that was practically made out of nothing, by the accumulation chakra. It was similar to that of the Juobi that knew nothing but destruction. Later, Ryo injected the Sanbai's soul into her body. After the Sanbai's soul sensed the mini Juobi's consciousness, it got too scared to resist it. Korin easily swallowed the Sanbai's soul, gaining his wisdom with that. However, she was still like a newborn child at that point, like a blank sheet of paper. The Sanbai's soul didn't digest for a while, so at the beginning, it seemed like the beast was going to be the Sanbai. When her soul and body started merging, Ryo's spiritual power grabbed her attention. With curiosity, she looked into Ryo's spirit. Doing so, she saw him injecting the Sanbai's soul within her, which was the key to her true birth. This made her regard Ryo as her master. Ryo was very surprised when he learned about how things went. This was coincidence, and something that he had never seen before in the manga. That is to say, Korin, that you are of a new life form? Different from all 10 Biju. Yes, master. My soul is different from them. Even the Juobi would be able to swallow me. Korin, don't call me master anymore, call me Ryo. Ryo never cared for enslaving others. To him, all creatures comparable in wits to humans are equal. This was the case with Kajin, and now it's the same with Korin. Kajin felt Ryo's goodwill and respect as he said those words. She had the wisdom and feelings of human beings, and Ryo's attitude towards her made her recognize him even more. Nevertheless, your size is really troublesome. How can I bring you back to the village? Ryo felt he was in a bit of a pinch. You can seal me into your body, just like a Biju. I am different though from other Biju, I have a physical body. So you seal my chakra, and my soul and body will still be free to move freely. Ryo's heart was shook. After thinking for a while, he decided to become Korin's Jinchuriki. Ryo used to want to be the Sanbai's Jinchuriki. He needed the beast's chakra and water control abilities. Now, Korin is definitely the superior choice. Korin's sealing went flawlessly. Like they previously decided, Ryo used the 8 trigrams seal to seal her chakra into his body. He also left a gap on the seal so that she could use her own chakra at will. Korin's body was originally the Gadumazo's arm. Now, it's that of a water Kirin. This look won't be easily dealt with by everyone. Ryo taught her transformation, and she turned into a ragdoll cat just like before, and jumped into Ryo's arms. Chapter 173, Kurama's Response. The next morning, Ryo, while holding Korin, used teleportation barrier to get from the Forest of Death to Orochimaru's lab. There was no one there. Yujao had left a note saying that she and Enko went out on a task, so that Ryo would not worry. Originally, Ryo wanted to get Yujao to meet Korin, but unfortunately didn't happen to catch up with her. He had to leave with Korin in his arms. Korin was just born in the world. She was greatly curious about everything, remaining Ryo's arms, looking left and right all the time. The villagers along Ryo's way saw him holding the cat, and men, women, and children all envied him. It was because Korin looked extremely cute. Her yellow and white ragdoll cat fur was stunning, and her sapphire-like eyes looked beautiful. Everyone's envy made Ryo suddenly feel uncomfortable. He clung to Korin and used the lightning chakra mode flicker to disappear in plain sight. Ryo's destination was Ichiraku Ramen. Because he was dealing with Korin, he remained in the forest of death for 2 days. Over the course of that period, he didn't get to eat anything. Usually, Ryo wouldn't have problems standing such a situation. However, ever since he changed the genetic arrangement within his cells, his daily food intake was greatly increased. After all, his great vitality required a lot of energy to be maintained. Ryo arrived at Ichiraku Ramen, put Korin down and couldn't wait to get 3 bowls of seafood ramen. "Ryo, what is this?" While Ryo was eating, Korin smelled the scent of the ramen, and asked curiously. "This is ramen. Do you want to eat?" While saying that, Ryo lifted some ramen with his chopsticks and gave it to Korin. She sniffed the ramen for a while before finally surrendering to the temptation and eating a whole lot of it. "Ramen is delicious." Korin immediately fell in love with the flavor. Ryo quickly finished the 3 bowls, eating while feeding Korin. From Ichiraku, Ryo entered Sage mode, looking for Kushina's location. After locating her chakra, Ryo lifted Korin and teleported to Kushina. At the time, she was practicing with Rin and Shisui. After Obito's death, Rin's character changed drastically. Previously, Rin used to be mainly interested in medical ninjutsu. Now, she started paying attention to gaining more strength, so she was practicing with Kushina for a while. Shisui, who did not see Ryo for a long time, could also follow Kushina around for practice. "Hey! Hello everyone!" Ryo saluted the 3. "Ryo! Where have you been all this time? How long are you going to leave your apprentice to me? Aren't you going to take responsibility of his training?" said Kushina with some anger. "So sorry Ne-san, I had a lot to deal with lately." Kushina wasn't about to let him off the hook just because she knew he was honest. She kept scolding him indiscriminately. "Ryo, what's that kin in your arms?" Just as Ryo was getting verbally pummeled by Kushina, Rin realized his was holding Korin in his arms. When Kushina heard Rin's words, she looked down, her eyes widened, and she immediately became attracted by Korin. Girl cannot resist anything fluffy, especially if they are as cute as Korin. Kushina was immediately hooked. Same goes for Rin, and even Shisui could help but get his eyes attracted to Korin from time to time. "Ryo, give it to me. I want to give it a hug." Kushina's mood became better just like that, and all her anger faded away. After Ryo mentally sought Korin's consent, he handed her over to Kushina. Adversus. As soon as Kushina reached to grab the cat, the QB stopped her. "Kushina, wait. There's something wrong with this cat." Out of trust of Kurama, Kushina didn't grab Korin, taking a few steps back instead. "Kushina, switch with me," Kurama said, and then took over Kushina's body. "Kid, what is the cat in your arms?" Kurama could not wait to ask. After Korin sensed Kurama consciousness, she got all agitated. Apparently, she could feel the pressure of Kurama's horrible chakra. Ryo initially came here planning on talking to Kurama about Korin, but the QB was the one to take the initiative. Ryo concealed the matter of Madara and the Gadomazo's arm, and told Kurama about the rest of the details. Hearing that, Kurama fell into meditation. After a good while, Kurama came back to earth, and stared at Korin with a burning gaze. So, the chakra out of 5 Biju, and the soul of the Sanbai, could actually give birth to a new tailed beast. Kurama was in utter disbelief. After all, he wasn't only the strongest among the 9 Biju, he was also the most knowledgeable. Korin's appearance took him by surprise. "Kid, I want to see the power of this cat." "All right." Ryo very happily agreed. He then used the teleportation barrier to go with the QB in Kushina's body and Korin to the borders of the fire country. Ryo sensed that there was no one nearby, and unsealed the chakra within his body. Korin was immediately turned from a kitten into a prestigious water kirin. The QB could feel her chakra. Judging by that, he deemed her to be equivalent to the Yanbai in strength. Her chakra on its own was nothing for him to be scared of. What took Kurama by surprise was the natural energy infused within her chakra. Among all the Biju, only the Juobi was made out natural energy. The other Biju were only of assimilating natural energy, while Korin had it a constituent of its own existence. You, throw a Biju Dhamma at me. Kushina pointed at Korin and said. Oh! The Kyuubi's power was far beyond hers, and Korin did not dare argue with him. On top of that, she didn't sense any maliciousness from the Kyuubi, and therefore, she was obedient. She knew well how to make a Biju Dhamma from the Sanbai's memories. She opened her mouth, condensing a red and black Biju Dhamma the size of a human head, and then launching it at Kurama. Kushina's body was instantly wrapped in red chakra, getting her to the five-tailed cloak mode, which caught the Biju Dhamma. Kurama observed the sphere for a moment, noticing the presence of natural energy within it, and then threw the Biju Dhamma out. Boom! A small piece of the forest disappeared under the explosion of the attack. The next thing Kurama did was releasing his mental power. The souls of the Biju were separated from the Juobi, and they were all connected to each other. The Kyuubi wanted to confirm whether Korin's soul gave any connection to that of the Juobi. He eventually concluded that her soul was independent of the Juobi and the rest of the Biju. Kid, collect chakra from the Nibi, the Rokubai, the Nanabi, and the Hakubi. With their chakra, she could be complete. After that, Kurama gave Kushina's body back to her. She was listening to the whole dialogue between Ryo and Kurama. She never expected that the kitten that looked so cute before was actually a Biju. Ryo resealed Korin's chakra into his body, and her body and soul went back to being a ragdoll cat. She jumped into Ryo's arm and found a comfortable position to lie down. Seeing the cat, Kushina forgot all about the water Kirin. She robbed Korin from Ryo's arms, with Kurama not stopping her this time. Interesting young child. Perhaps, she could become another Juobi in the future. Watching Kushina play with Korin, Kurama muttered to himself. Chapter 174, The Rokubai and the Scapegoat. Hokage-sama, this is all the information that we could collect after investigation. In the Hokage's office, the 3RD's face was rather heavy after listening to the Umbu's report. 2 days ago, he suddenly received intelligence saying that there was a Biju Dhamma released on the borders of the Fire Country. This was what happened between Korin and Kurama. But it just happened by coincidence that the third also received information about the Rokubai Jinchuriki leaving being sent out by the Mist Village. Combining these two pieces of information, the third could not just sit still, and immediately dispatched an Umbu group to investigate the borders of the Fire Country. According to the information they obtained through their investigation, the Umbu confirmed that the damage in forest was doing of a Biju Dhamma, but they found no direct proof that it was that of the Rokubai. The third could not afford to take the matter lightly. Konoha had emerged as the sole victor of the Third World War. It could be very possible for other villages to have movements in the area. Umbu, bring me Ryo and Minato. The third asked the Umbu around him. Wait. Bring Ryo and Kushina. The third suddenly thought of something and changed his mind. As usual, the Umbu had no questions asked, and even though he had some doubts, he meticulously carried out his task. In the past few days, Ryo was brainwashing Shisui in the third training ground. Ryo thought that some Shisui's actions in the manga were too selfless and borderline dumb. He felt that the kid was completely poisoned by the will of fire, and that he had balanced things out and correct his values. Shisui wasn't agreeing with Ryo's views, as they conflicted with the education he received ever since childhood. However, Ryo wasn't thinking of changing Shisui's ideas immediately. He just buried a seed in his heart that should sprout when the time is right and change his actions. Later, the mentor and apprentice started practicing. Ryo had inherited the method of his own teachers. He used his own fist to make his apprentice recognize his deficiencies. The two were training almost daily. Shisui's strength greatly improved with fighting Kushina and Ryo. With the blessing of having the Sharingan, he soon reached the level of a Jonin. Their training was soon over, and Shisui laid on the ground panting. Ryo was about to give him his evaluation, when the Umbu showed up. Ryo-san, the Hokage-sama wants you in his office. I see. Did he summon anyone else besides me? Ryo asked casually. Yes, he also summoned Kushina. Ryo raised his eyebrows in surprise. The third actually called to cage tier ninjas for this matter, with one of them being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. At the office, Ryo and Kushina soon arrived, and the third immediately handed out 2 scrolls to the two. Opening the first they read, The Explosion of Biju Dama on the Borders of the Fire Country. The two realized what it was all about, but neither of them showed the faintest smile. They went ahead and read the second scroll, The Mist Ninjas sent the Rokubai out on a mission. This is an S-rank mission. I need you two to investigate and trace the Rokubai and find out why he was sent out of his village. Also, the Biju appearing on our borders was not the Rokubai. After taking the mission, Ryo and Kushina left the 3RDS office. Ryo, where are we going to find the Rokubai? Kushina asked with a bitter face. While no one else knew what was going on, Ryo and Kushina had special insight on the matter. The Biju in the Fire Country was none other than Korin, with the Biju Dama's explosion being hers and Kurama's work. What information they received was actually equivalent to nothing. It was as if the third sent them out blindly to find the Rokubai, which was just like looking for needle in a haystack. Ryo smiled and said, wherever he is, didn't Kushina Ne-san want to leave the village for the longest time? Isn't this a perfect opportunity? Yet, Kushina's eyes lit up, and she was thrilled to realize that she was about to go out of the village again. Adversus. The next morning, Ryo, who was carrying Korin, gathered with Kushina at the entrance of the village. There were also Shisui, and Pakura's sister, Shi. The war between Konoha and the Sand was finally over. Ryo intended to take this opportunity and fulfill his promise by carrying Shi to the Sand village. Last night, Chins heard about this and felt very reluctant to accept the matter. The two spent many years with each other, and they became very close to each other. She was also reluctant to leave Chins, and the two spent the whole night talking and bidding each other farewell. On Konoha's gate, Ryo transported the whole group to the nearest teleportation barrier marked to the Sand village. They could only continue their journey by walking. The seals on Shi's chakra were already removed a few years ago. None of the group was slow, and in under one day, they all reached the Wind Country's territory. Returning after so many years, she had mixed feeling about entering her homeland again. After the group gave her a moment, they got back to moving again. Wait! Ryo suddenly felt great chakra fluctuation from their front left, and stopped his group's movements. Ryo, what's wrong? Kushina asked. Ne-san, use Kurama's chakra to perceive whatever's in that direction. Ryo pointed to the front left. Kushina nodded, and with the help of Kurama, she also sensed the massive chakra in front. Kushina, that's the Rokubai. The Kyubi perceived Seiken and notified Kushina, who immediately told Ryo. Haha, it seems that we are lucky. Ne-san, I'll go ahead and finish the task, while you stay here to protect them. After finishing his words, Ryo entered the Ice Lightning Chakra mode and disappeared in front of everyone. Ryo went ahead following the chakra he perceived. As he got closer to the Rokubai, he perceived another familiar chakra. Perceiving this chakra, Ryo took out his ice scalpel and picked up the pace. When he reached the scene, he saw a seriously damaged Pakura besieged by several ninjas and the Rokubai Jinchuriki. It's one thing after another. But I guess it's alright. Ryo smiled and left an ice scalpel in place, and he flickered in. The mist ninjas just had a glimpse of him. Before they had time to react, both Ryo and Pakura had disappeared. Pakura felt confused. She did not expect that Ryo would suddenly appear to save her life. Hey, don't we know each other? Ryo smiled at Pakura, who was in a daze. Pakura returned to her senses. Ryo Yamanaka. How are you here? I came to bring your sister back to the Sand Village. I didn't expect that you would be encountered by the Mist Ninjas. My sister? Don't get her back to the village. Caught, hearing the news, Pakura became agitated, aggravating her wound. Do not worry. I haven't gotten her there yet. By the way, the Rokubai is my main mission. Don't you mind letting me deal with it? Be careful. Besides the Rokubai Jinchuriki, they have a Quasi-Kage and 2 elite Jonins. Pakura kindly warned Ryo. That's quite the lineup that the mist prepared for you. How did you survive? Asked Ryo curiously. Pakura gave him an awkward gaze and said, do you think that everyone is as fearless of my Kekii Genkai as you? They simply could not touch me. They had to exhaust my chakra first. I'm not like I used to be, you know, I'm already caged here. Is that so? Well, you're still far from catching up with me. Just watch how I'll avenge you. Chapter 175, Ice World. Ryo's strength had grown tremendously in the last period. First, he activated the Mangekyo Sharingan, and then found a way to keep it from losing sight by rearranging the genes in his cells. On top of that, just a few days ago, he became Korin's Jinchuriki. Ryo at his current level should have no problems dealing with the Rokubai Jinchuriki. He immediately flickered back to the mist group, and looked at the him. The only Rokubai Jinchuriki that Ryo was exposed to in the manga was Yotakata, a mist ninja often wearing a long, light blue kimono, and a handsome young man with long hair. But Ryo's first impression of the guy in front of him was disgust. The man had thick mucus all over his body, just like the Rokubai. Ryo rarely gave any value to people's appearances, but this guy ruining the image of the Rokubai Jinchuriki to him made him more hostile. The Rokubai Jinchuriki was also looking back at Ryo, a black-haired young man, with Konoha's forehead protector, 3 Tomo Sharingan and whose body shines with lightning chakra. He felt imminent threat from the person in front of him. The Quasi-Kage behind him took 2 steps back, apparently recognizing Ryo. "You are the one who took Pakura just now. Where is she? Hand her over." The Quasi-Kage and the Rokubai Jinchuriki did not speak, and a Jonin was the first to jump in. Ryo smiled, and his ice lightning chakra mode became more violent. After leaving an ice scalpel in place, he disappeared in front of his enemy's eyes. "Be careful. That's Ryo Yamanaka." His lightning, the Quasi-Kage's words weren't finished when suddenly stopped, as the Jonin who had just spoken had Chidori go through his heart. "Damn! Sudan, water prison jutsu." The other Jonin tried to trap Ryo in water. "Run, you idiot!" By the time the Quasi-Kage finished his words, Ryo had already flickered in front of this Jonin, slitting his throat. After killing the 2 Jonins, Ryo dropped his scalpel and went back to his initial place. The Quasi-Kage was trembling. He already knew that Ryo Yamanaka was so terrible. However, facing him was a whole other deal. To him, it seemed that the myth is real, and that there's a young man in Konoha, with both the skills of Konoha's Yellow Flash and White Fang. The Rokubai Jinchuriki was also looking at the young man in sight. From what he saw, he had no confidence in his ability to take him sewn. At this speed, even the Rokubai itself couldn't capture Ryo's movements, let alone his Jinchuriki. "Ryo Yamanaka, our mission is not in conflict with Konoha's interests. Why stop us? Does Konoha want to provoke war once again?" The Jinchuriki tried to reason with Ryo. "Pakura's my friend, it's as simple as that. As for war, you think that your village still has more people to kill at Konoha's ninja's hands. You're too arrogant, child." The Rokubai Jinchuriki was a good level Kage tier. Even the 3rd Mizu Kage did not want to provoke him. Today, Ryo pushed the line and made him furious. "Sir, calm down. Right now, we must retreat 1st. The Quasi-Kage tried to prevent his superior from fighting. The Rokubai Jinchuriki pushed the Quasi-Kage aside, and around his body, a cloak of crimson chakras slowly started to appear. "Brat, I'll make you witness Seiken's power. Wisdom Wolf Decay." With the Seiken's chakra, the Rokubai's Jinchuriki released a jutsu similar to skilled mist technique, but that consisted of strong corrosive acid mist. The group was in the desert, with no trees around. They could not gauge the specific destructive power of the ice mist, and Ryo didn't care about it too much. The acid mist quickly spread out, and was closing in on Ryo, who tried to send it away using wind release, great breakthrough twice, but the mist did not show signs of being blown away. At this time, Ryo noticed with his Sharingan that the stones that came into contact with the acid mist were corroded in an instant, and that the great breakthrough was being countered by the mist's momentum. "This is bad. What happened to the stones?" scared Ryo, pushing him to jump away. The destructive power of this Jinchuriki was far beyond his imagination. However, Ryo wasn't about to hide, but he needed to act fast. His pupils quickly took the shape of 6 pointed stars, and he made use of the scalpel he left behind after killing the 2nd Jonin to teleport behind his enemy's back. The Rokubai Jinchuriki immediately noticed Ryo and turned around to attack him. Ryo, however, did not dodge. Instead, he activated his Mangekyo. Suddenly, the Rokubai Jinchuriki sensed that the weather had changed, and felt that he went into another place. The original desert had disappeared, and in front of them was world covered with snow. The north wind came whistling, carrying snowflakes. Mountains, trees, and fields, everything was made out of ice. Genjutsu. This is definitely a genjutsu. Kai. 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 Damn it. Why isn't it working? Said the Jinchuriki. Sir, could it be that Ryo Yamanaka used a time-space jutsu to get us in this place? Impossible. Saiken just told me that this is a genjutsu. We are definitely in a genjutsu space. The Rokubai Jinchuriki was not through talking, and he was suddenly hit by a block of the surrounding ice. Bastard, Wisdom Wolf Decay. He tried to use the acid mist jutsu again to corrode the ice world. Unfortunately for him, his mist lost its effect in this environment. As soon as it appeared, it got frozen immediately, becoming pink ice. Outside the ice world, Ryo, who was putting the jutsu into practice for the first time, felt he was within an inch of death. As soon as he opened the ice world, all his power, mental power, chakra, and even natural energy poured madly into crafting the ice world like a tide. Originally, Ryo thought that this technique was just a genjutsu space. He expected it to drain his mental power mostly. However, the ice world was space between genjutsu and reality. This space was all covered with ice and snow. With the same principle he used in his teleportation, Ryo could freely shuffle his body and mind between the two worlds, and could draw people's consciousness into the ice world. Ryo managed to get the consciousness of his two foes into the ice world. However, as soon as the ice world opened up, Ryo's power and chakra were exhausted. He temporarily lost contact with the ice world. Quickly, he recovered his power with the help of Korin's chakra. Then, he started by entering the ice world. By the time he went in, the two people's consciousness was assimilated by the ice world, becoming two ice sculptures. Ryo left the ice world, and wiped the blood off of his right eye. After a while, he walked towards the Rokubai Jinchuriki's body. This was a rare opportunity for him to get part of the Rokubai's chakra. However, Ryo did not expect that after the death of its Jinchuriki, Saiken would take control of his body.